across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 10. Lots to talk about. I don't know why Mike says there's no news. There's quite a lot. We're not averting World War III just yet anyway. We're solving the entire country's budget in terms of welfare. But, yeah, not really. Oh, but lots of people are going to die because we are solving it too much, according to backbench Labour MPs. And the US Vice President reckons that we are stagnating in this country because of, oh, what a surprise, immigration. Hey, thanks, JD. Tell us something we don't already know, mate. Anyway, all of that coming up on the show in a bit more detail. Putin has rejected Donald Trump's proposal for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine after a frank and, according to Donald Trump, very productive phone call between the two presidents. Instead, Vladimir Putin only agreed to a 30-day pause in attacks on energy and infrastructure, which would, of course, completely benefit Russia rather than Ukraine, and says he'll hold further talks on stopping hostilities in the Black Sea. But in return, he says he would demand that Ukraine not rearm, not mobilise during the partial truce, and called for a complete cessation of all Western military aid and intelligence support to Kyiv. Basically giving a full-on Russian victory. Who are we kidding? So are those terms remotely acceptable? I would love to hear from you on that. Plus, Keir Starmer has said the soaring cost of sickness and disability benefits is having a devastating impact on public finances. This came after the Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall announced the £5 billion package of welfare cuts that has been decried as too much and too little. I have a funny feeling you'll know which way I'm on which side I'm on. And as I said, JD Vance saying that the reason Britain and many other countries, Canada and others, are stagnating in their economies is because of high levels of immigration, where we've relied on cheap imported labour. Some of us have been saying this for a very, very long time. Nice to know some important people are now listening, eh? Anyway, all that is coming up. Delighted to say, joining me today, as usual, now on a Wednesday, former Conservative Government Advisor Claire Pearsall. A very good morning to you, my love.
Morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. I say, lots to talk about at home and abroad. When I do my sort of list of topics that you and I can have a chat about at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, trying to whittle it down, I usually find really rather hard. Question I'm asking our audience today, and I'll put to you, is your reaction to, I mean, you know, Trump saying he had a successful phone call. It was supposed to be a call that was between 3 and 5 UK time. At 3 o'clock, Vladimir Putin is on stage at some no-mark conference, and he's actually reminded by the host, I think you're supposed to be having a phone call with the US president. He goes, no, I'm in no hurry. He was an hour late to a phone call with Donald Trump. If that doesn't tell you who's got the upper hand in this conversation, if someone booked a call in with me at 3 o'clock and then didn't bother turning up until 4 o'clock, that phone call would not be happening. I don't know about you. I would consider that so disrespectful. I mean, just how Trump should have been unavailable at that point, just to make it clear that's not gonna fly. Putin completely run rings round Trump, as we always knew he would. Trump is like, oh, he's got a hockey match out of it. There's going to be a Russian-US hockey match. I mean, really? Oh, well done. I mean, well done. Is that going to keep the people of Ukraine safe? I wonder. I want to know what your reaction is, particularly to Putin basically saying, well, we can have a ceasefire, but the West would have to end all aid to Ukraine. You know what that means. I know what that means. And we're not talking about just the US ending it, the West ending it. That means Ukraine basically becoming Soviet, becoming Russian. Russians taking it over. Your reaction to that, please give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. And don't forget, of course, calls are charged at the national rate. And standard network message. It's your text cost one standard network rate message. And of course, it's free on YouTube and of course on X as well. Claire Pearsall, I mean, this was not Donald Trump's finest hour. But if you say, I want it quickly, I'll give away all my negotiating positions, you kind of make it easy for the other guy to basically twist you around his little finger, don't you?
Well, of course you do. And then the attitude of that other person by pitching up an hour late with zero apology, I don't care attitude. I mean, he should have gone to voicemail at that point. You shouldn't be available to take it, should you?
I'm so sorry, Donald Trump isn't how busy.
Yeah, I mean, an hour, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. All
no,
right,
I don't know. I'm sorry, not even 5-10 minutes. I mean, I'm sorry. That is a power play, and that's a power play needs to just be like, yeah. Talk to the hand at this point.
Exactly, and then we've got a readout from the phone call, which
from
was
Putin's side first.
Exactly, they got that out there very, very quickly. Then we saw the American version, very sanitised, and I've seen those from government calls as well. I mean, they are very, very sanitised.
You know what they're like,
yeah, and it's very basic. So I'd love to have been on the end of all of this, but it is quite interesting that the main thing they seem to have got is an ice hockey match.
Yeah, and a prisoner exchange, which was, by the way, going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
And again, crucially, this agreeing to a 30-day pause in attacks on energy plants and infrastructure. That is basically because the Ukrainians have been very successfully handicapping Russian energy production by regular oil strikes on oil refineries and using long-range weapons, which, of course, they have provided by the West. I mean... Look, Putin got some things that he wanted. I can't see anything that the West got out of that. By the way, Zelensky has agreed to a ceasefire. So when we have Donald Trump telling him in the Oval Office, you don't, and speaking after us, you don't want peace. If you do, talks about Ukrainian men going into the meat grinder, you know, and how awful it is, and he talks in these very gory terms about death. He's agreed to a ceasefire. Yes. But it has to be a real ceasefire, land, sea and air. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, because looking at from Putin's point of view, it's only on energy plants and infrastructure. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter if it's a hospital or a school or a residential area. Yeah, it isn't interesting, by the way, because there were attacks from both overnight, but Russian strikes on civilian infrastructure just hours after the agreement to this partial ceasefire. When you attack civilian, these aren't places where Ukrainian fighters are hiding. These are hospitals and schools and apartment buildings, clearly civilian territory, with no military aim, not like Israel attacking civilian properties that are being basically housing Hamas fighters the pro-Palestinian lot, the woke lot, they call that genocide. They use, completely incorrectly. Even whichever side of that war you're on in the Middle East, they use the word genocide. That this is an outrageous war crime, it's genocidal. But when Putin does it, not a whisper. Not a whisper. No issue at all. So almost as if they're supporting that position. Isn't it? It's very strange. And especially, again, when Hamas fighters, as we know, in the latest IDF strikes on Israel, on Gaza, they actually took out 10 senior Hamas figures. It's been admitted by Hamas. So they were legitimate targets. They were, and they were very angry about that when they're taking out those legitimate targets. I can't believe there's anyone left in Hamas. That's the thing, apart from the fact that most of the civilian population appear to support them. But this is the thing. There'll be Trump supporters among you. I know, you call me, UK, we had, Seb Gawker on, as an aide to the president, first term and second term, saying Trump derangement syndrome. Trump derangement syndrome is when you say anything that he says or does is mad and wrong and bad and evil, OK? Even in his first term, when I did not approve of his presidency, this time round, I think he's the better choice. I really think he's the better choice over either Biden or Kamala Harris. And made that very clear. Even in the first time, when he talked about, withdrawing from NATO, support for countries that didn't pay their 2% of GDP, when everybody was outraged by that, I'm like, that's perfectly reasonable. If you don't pay your club membership dues, you're not part of the club anymore. Yeah. So he called out a lot of things, which I thought was a really good thing. I'm not deranged about his views. I've supported him on loads of things he does. I think he's deeply, fundamentally, morally, strategically, politically and economically horribly wrong when it comes to Ukraine. I cannot believe that any of the sensible people around him, the Marco Rubios and others, think that this is a good policy. He is completely and utterly devoid of personal knowledge about his own ability to negotiate. What he's doing with Putin is not the art of the deal. No, it really isn't. He's never come across somebody like Putin before. He goes on about being a businessman and making deals, and that's fine. You can do that in the city and you can do that with other economies. But when it comes to Putin, there are an awful lot of rules that just don't apply. Yeah. And he can't see that. And I'm like you, I'm a little bit sceptical about some of the stuff that Trump comes up with. Some of it I support. It doesn't mean that I think he's brilliant, because I don't.
I think in this respect,
he's neither brilliant.
dangerous.
I think he's neither brilliant nor evil.
Yes,
I think
exactly.
he's just another flawed human being who's president.
Yeah.
And
that's it. But I don't think there's a derangement syndrome involved when you're calling out some behaviour.
But when are people saying that, that there's this 4D game of chess being played and he's this amazing deal maker? If you give away the timetable you want it done on, if you give away all of the things which are the things that Putin is afraid of, which is, NATO a membership for Ukraine, NATO troops on the ground. If you give away all of that, so you give up, stop giving military aid to Ukraine, you literally given away all of your negotiating pieces. Putin knows that. He's a very wily, cunning, very, 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 very highly intelligent former KGB officer. He's running rings around him. I mean, there are people selling rugs in the souk at Marrakesh who are better deal makers right now than Donald Trump. And I think this is an embarrassment. But I think it's genuine. I think it's an embarrassment to America. I think it's an embarrassment to the West. And I think people who are defending this, people who are around Donald Trump have got to get to him and say, you are wrong on this. You are putting the Western Europe, which is, by the way, a huge strategic ally in the global game of power, at huge risk. You are basically enabling Vladimir Putin and giving succor to the likes of Xi Jinping in China. He may not care about Ukraine, but he damn well cares about Taiwan and the power of China in the South China Sea. So, he better be paying attention, because I'll tell you what, Xi Jinping is paying attention. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's talk about stuff back home. We had the government benefit crackdown, long announced. We knew most of it already, as we often do. The Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall, who I don't know about you, I find utterly insufferable. I've got to be frank. She's a perfectly nice person in real life. I've done enough, question times with her over the years and things like that. But there's a way she talks that is just so patronising and just hand-wringing. And we're in this bizarre situation where she's announced £5 billion, we're told, of benefit cuts. Given that they don't know how many people their cuts would apply to, how can they know that? We're not going to get those figures until next week in the spring statement. And the Office of Budget Responsibility working those figures out. But we're told more than 1 million people on benefits are going to have their payments cut. The main aim of this is that there's no freeze on the amount of you get in personal independence payments if you've got a disability of some sort, but it's going to be harder to qualify for the daily living allowance component. Basically, that's what they say. A, it's not enough. 5 billion saving ain't enough. B, if you lot in power, the Tories, had tried to do this, every single one of that front bench, along with their backbenchers who were screaming and jumping up and down yesterday, would be up in arms telling you that you're about to kill people. And C, you've got all these people on the Labour backbenchers, the usual suspects. I mean, John McDonnell and others. And they're all just saying this is awful and people are going to die and it's terrible. These people are living in cloud cuckoo land. Do they honestly believe that we genuinely just suddenly have randomly an extra 1 million people who are unable to work because of their anxiety or their depression, completely out of kilter with the rest of the Western world? These people are dishonest, aren't they?
Well, I think we also need to differentiate between those who are disabled and who require assistance to get to work. And a lot of people who claim PIP benefit are also in work. And it's
1 in 6. Everyone, the stats gone out there, it's most people. It's not. It's 1 in 6. I've looked at the official stats. I'm old-fashioned like that. I do like a fact.
But I think that why shouldn't we look at the amount of people claiming a benefit that we pay for as a state? I mean, I don't understand this. And you're right, the Conservative government got it in the neck badly for the spare room subsidy, or bedroom tax.
Bedroom tax, it was called. It wasn't a tax.
No, it wasn't a tax. And I kept saying that even to my husband, and I keep reminding him. And we were called evil, nasty. There was a film made about us, about how people were going to die. But in this instance...
People were going to die because of the 15 quid or something they were going to lose from their council tax or something, weren't they?
Exactly.
Well, again, I found that bizarre. We had, when I was a kid, when my parents were students, we had lodgers. We had I remember the first 7 years of my life, we always had lodgers because they couldn't afford the home without having a lodger.
Yeah, but also...
I didn't think it was demeaning. I don't remember. They all seemed quite nice people.
Yeah, but you also...
Bit of free babysitting every now and then.
Kind of live within your means. Do you remember that?
Old-fashioned.
Yeah.
Old-fashioned. Never catch on.
Never catch on. My mother telling me to cut my cloth accordingly. If I couldn't afford it, I wasn't to buy it. Well, no.
I'm sorry.
Really.
I think everyone under the age of 40, this is a whole new concept to you. This is mind-blowing stuff for you, isn't it? No one's ever suggested this before.
But I think we need to see what the impact assessment is going to say as to how people are going to be affected. But
it will be wrong. I'll tell you what, it'll be wrong, because the funny thing is people have so many incentives to try and get round this stuff.
Yeah.
They will come up with it. There are literally put into Google, how do I claim disability benefit? There are a whole website. There's a website that they've got a subscription service. It's about 25 quid a year. And you get your money back. If you don't, with their advice, get onto disability benefits, they will give you your money back. It's a money-making scam. But I mean, it's as a simple matter of fact. You know, the number of people who've come on since 2020, since lockdown, I know people have been hurt by it. If they were able to work before, they're going to be able to work again in the future, so they shouldn't be written off. And it's bad for them, bad for the country, can't afford it, full stop. But comparable to other countries, there's no reason why our lockdown harmed people here more than it did in France or Italy or America or Canada or anywhere else where they had strict lockdowns. So I'm sorry, I'm not accepting it. At which point you need to say 100%, 1 million people need to come off, end of. There are definitely 1 million people who shouldn't be on it. And we're going to get you all off it.
I think
end of.
I mean, I don't think that is a bad thing at all. It's quite interesting that they're going to try and bury the impact assessment under the spring statement. It's almost as if they don't want people to look at details.
Yeah.
Funny that.
But again, they're saying this is going to be. They're saying it's not about the money; it's a moral thing. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable to be on both. But again, if you lot had done this, they'd all be up in arms, and they were up in arms when you tried to do it. That said, this all happened under your Tory watch.
Yeah,
I'm not you personally. I mean, I'm not making her personally to blame for everything that's gone wrong.
And please don't. Don't everybody write in and have a go. But no, you're right. I mean, it needed to have been done and dusted 10 years ago.
It's a bit rich, like Helen Whately, the Shadow Secretary of State, saying like, this doesn't go far enough. I mean, and the laughing in the chamber was, I thought, very, very apt. You know, you cannot stand there when you were in the cabinet before and say, well, you should go further. I mean, this literally happened under your watch.
And it needs to be dealt with. It absolutely does. But really whether Labour have the capacity to take this through to getting it through a vote remains to be seen.
I mean, again, about another thing, you know, £3.5 billion being spent by the UK on public services for migrants on benefits. I mean, 3.5 billion quid. I mean, it's huge sums of money. This ties in with what J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, had to say. That he gave a speech yesterday talking about how most of the Western world, including Britain and Canada, the two countries he names, are stagnating because of immigration, basically mass immigration of people on low-skilled, low-paid jobs, and basically cheap foreign labour has been used to keep the economy going rather than, you know, basically economies of scale and modernising and new technology and efficiency savings and all of that. And we've just basically that's what we do. And people like me have been saying this for a very, very, very long time, and that's the reality.
It is, and I think what we're seeing now is, especially with young people, they don't want to go to work. They're saying there aren't any jobs, but actually if we didn't have the mass migration into some of those lower paid jobs, then arguably you would have vacancies for those young people.
And they probably pay more as well.
And they probably
we would have to pay more for goods, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we wouldn't be subsidising minimum wage jobs by big business with free housing, you know, with us paying for the housing benefit. We pay more anyway, it's just paid in a different way.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think you'll notice it on in the grand scale on all of your bills if it's done through one means or another. It's one of those things. We're all going to pay more. We know we're going to pay more. We're currently paying more. It's sort of where's the difference?
Absolutely. There's so much more I want to talk about, but we're going to get to a quick break, and then I want to go to your calls coming in thick and fast on Ukraine. Putin has rejected Trump's plan for a ceasefire tomorrow. The West ends all aid to Ukraine. What's your reaction to that? This morning, Zelensky's been giving a press conference with the NATO Secretary General, and he says, basically, very simply, that there should be an unconditional ceasefire. I think even if there were conditions, but there were reasonable conditions, that would be fine. Putin has got Trump round his little finger, as far as I'm concerned. If you were Donald Trump and Putin turned up an hour late for that phone call because he just says, he wasn't in a hurry, he was in some utterly pointless conference, which he clearly was doing to make a point, I'm somewhere public and I don't have to be on the phone call if I don't want to. Would you even have taken that phone call? Because I don't think I would have. And as Claire said, should have gone to voicemail at that point. I want to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
There is no requirement for him to go anywhere. He shouldn't go anywhere. If he does, it should be paid for by people. You know, if, for example, the Parliament of, I don't know, Burkina Faso decides that it wants a lesson in how brilliantly the Brits run their parliament and would like him to come over, they would pay for it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:25 is the time. Coming up, we are going to be talking to the absolutely, I mean, a man who really does know Vladimir Putin. He literally knows Vladimir Putin. We're going to talk to Sir Bill Browder. He's Putin's basically #1 foreign enemy. And we're going to talk to him about, well, what he makes of events yesterday and where we're going forward when it comes to Ukraine and between this phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. I want to know what your reaction is to Putin basically rejecting Trump's plan for a ceasefire, demanding the West ends all aid to Ukraine, not just the US, all Western aid and intelligence help to Ukraine, basically completely holding Ukraine's hands behind their back while they continue their invasion. Your thoughts? Well, let's talk to Phil, who is in Hertfordshire. Hello, Phil.
Good morning. Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. What do you want to say?
Good morning. Yeah, firstly, with the phone call and hold on for an hour, yeah, Trump should have sort of just hung up or just put him on sort of hold.
Please hold. Your call is important to us.
Absolutely, yeah. Press option 1, 2, 3, etc. Yeah, definitely. But with regards to Putin holding out, now there's an awful lot going on politically, isn't there, in the West, and with Trump just getting in. Yeah. And Putin knows that there's an awful lot of maybe upset change going on. So he don't know, really, does he, Putin, if Trump's going to still be in power, the Republicans, in, say, 4 or 5 years' time. Yeah. It could be that the Democrats could get back in again. Then we could go right back to square one again, where we are. And they're going to start, you know, the Democrats are going to start getting aggressive again. So possibly maybe Putin's trying to get as much as he can, knowing that he might have to relent on something should that happen. If he doesn't, then it's a win-win for him because he's got more than he bargained for.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely trying to get as much as he can. I mean, you know, he's got no question. Yeah. I think at this point, the chances of without Trump taking a strong stance, we are looking at Ukraine. Their best-case scenario is losing the Donbass regions and losing Crimea. Pretty much for good. It may not be recognised, completely legally internationally, but it looks like that's what is going to happen. And I think it's a terrible, terrible tragedy for that country. But here's the thing: should a ceasefire, should peace be found at all costs? That's the question. Is what you can always get peace. We were talking about this yesterday. You can always have peace. You can wave the white flag. You can have peace tomorrow. Is at what cost?
This is the thing, isn't it? You know, the loss of life is tragic, and it doesn't matter who's losing a life. And it's this thing, isn't it, Julia? You've got people that know each other, that talk to each other regularly, fall out. And the people that pay the price and kill each other, the people that don't know each other. For them people.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Again, I feel just as sorry for the Russian conscripts as I do for the Ukrainians. I mean, you know, North Koreans, they thought they were going on a training exercise, apparently, and then just turned up and were just sort of sent to their slaughter. The whole thing is just awful. It was absolutely awful. But there's only one side that's the aggressor. That seems simple to me. Really appreciate your call, Phil. Thank you very much indeed. Anthony is on the line. He is in Manchester. Hello, Anthony.
Hi, Julia. How are we doing?
Very well indeed. All the better for talking to you. What do you want to say?
So we've been talking about several things. I mentioned several points. Firstly, Putin will not surrender the ground he's taken at all. He's had nearly 1 million troops either die or injured to take these little bit of 20% he's got. If he goes back to Russia now, he looks weak, he looks pathetic, he'll get overthrown. And also, the second point I want to make is putting troops on the ground. I served as a UN peacekeeper in Bosnia.
Yeah.
I was one of the first troops to go into Sarajevo when it was at the height of the fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the United Nations. We were seen as nothing more than extra targets for the troops.
Yeah, you had your little blue beret on, but you weren't allowed to actually even take part or even to return fire, I think, at that point.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I was there with a specialist unit. We were in Sarajevo, and we were seeing extra targets. They didn't take the slightest bit of notice of us. Now, my problem is, the only time that the Bosnians stopped fighting is when we changed from being UN troops to NATO troops and we started hitting back.
Yeah.
And we waved a bigger stick at them and said, look, now we're going to hit you with this stick. They stopped fighting.
Yeah.
If you put peacekeepers on the ground and they start hitting back, Putin will see that as aggressive NATO troops fighting for Ukraine.
Yeah.
And then we get into a big shooting war that we can't win.
Well, you say we can't win. You can. The West could easily beat Russia. We can absolutely our firepower. And yes, we haven't got the military ability right now, but we would have it very quickly if we needed to. We don't want to be in that situation. It seems to me the best way of not having that happen. And again, it cannot happen now, but it could happen in a few years' time when Vladimir Putin comes back for a bit more territory in Ukraine, and then Moldova, and then Poland and Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania. His ambitions are very clear. He stated them publicly. I don't know why people would be surprised by any of this. But the key thing is, if we made it clear, like, okay, we're not going to fire. We're not going to fire in anger. It's only going to be defensive, and he can choose to see that as aggression from NATO, but it's not, because it's in a neutral country that he has invaded. I don't think there's anything we can do about that. I don't see that there is any other solution.
I mean that's the problem. You're going to put British troops on the ground without clear instructions, turning around and telling them that they can only fire back if they're fired upon. They do need clear
instruction. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my son would be one of them. I'm sure of it, because my son's in the armed forces.
Yeah.
And it just frightens me, the fact that they're going to be putting them into a situation that they're not going to have control over. The British government wants to put those troops on the ground. The lads are not going to have clear instructions, and some of the lads are going to get killed for what? Putin is going to do what he wants. And you just need America on side. You need all of Europe on side, with all the troops could stop Putin. He's not managed to take Ukraine. He's managed to take 20% of Ukraine.
Exactly.
While the rest of Europe sat on its arse. Poland is probably the biggest threat we have. He's frightened of Poland because they've advanced the military so fast. They're doing recruitment. Yeah, they've been spending a good percentage of the GDP for a long time as well, because they understand the threat. I completely understand. Again, and look, I'm an armchair general. You've been on the ground. Your son would possibly be one of the people posted. I think if we did do it, it would have to be very clear about what we were willing to do, what we were not willing to do. But again, I think for me, I think if Putin needs to not just believe, he needs to know what we would do. And we're not giving a clear enough message at the moment. I agree. We can't go in half-heartedly.
Yeah.
You need to go in with a massive force from Poland, from the UK, from Germany, from Sweden. Let them know we are serious, and let them know the consequences of firing on these troops.
Absolutely.
You can't go in with 20,000 troops on an area that's nearly a front that's nearly 600 miles long.
Very good point. Anthony, I so appreciate your call, especially with your experience on the ground. I really appreciate that. But again, this is about what Putin needs to believe. He needs to believe and know that we are serious. And the West isn't serious yet. Europe is just waking up, frankly. And certainly I don't think we're getting any serious action from Donald Trump in the White House. I'd love to hear your thoughts, particularly on what Anthony had to say, especially if you have been a serving officer, or you're serving now, serving not the officers, the men on the actual front, men and women on the front line. If you've actually been serving in the military, we'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Right now, it's time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley, plus £10,000 this summer.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Very good luck with that. You do not want to miss out on that fantastic prize offer. Coming up, we're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk to a man who is, well, Vladimir Putin's #1 foreign enemy, I suppose, apart from Zelensky right now. Who knows? Sir Bill Browder, about what he makes of that phone call between Putin and Trump yesterday. Don't miss that. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's 10:36. Let's talk right now to Sir Bill Browder. His, bizarre claim to fame is Vladimir Putin's #1 foreign enemy. He's also the head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. Thank you so much for joining us, Sir Bill.
Great to be here.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, most of us who talk about Vladimir Putin have never met him. Like most of us probably wouldn't want to meet him. You've had to deal with him. You were once, one of the biggest investors in Russia. You started your justice campaign after your lawyer was basically murdered behind bars in Russia. You know to your own personal cost just how dangerous and untrustworthy the man that Vladimir Putin actually is. What do you make, just your general reaction to that planned phone call yesterday, Vladimir Putin sitting on stage at a no-mock conference, being an hour late to talk to Donald Trump and basically rejecting Trump's ceasefire and demanding that basically all Western military aid and intelligence help to Ukraine end forthwith before there is any proper ceasefire? What's your reaction to that?
Putin has made his maximalist demands since before the war started, and he hasn't deviated from those demands. And yesterday was just another example. He was expected to agree to an unconditional ceasefire, and he agreed to nothing of the sort. And as you mentioned, there was the humiliating being an hour late to a telephone call with Donald Trump, the most powerful man in the free world. And that was on top of after the Americans agreed with the Ukrainians for an unconditional ceasefire a week ago, Steve Witkoff shows up in Moscow and Putin makes him wait for a whole day.
That was the US negotiator and a mystery. He's, to all intents and purposes, the US president's representative and made to wait 8 hours for that meeting.
The whole thing is clear. that Putin doesn't respect America, he doesn't respect Donald Trump, and he's basically giving the middle finger to all of us.
I'm waiting for J.D. Vance to demand that there's an apology from Vladimir Putin, because he was very keen on Zelensky, not being rude to Donald Trump in the Oval Office. But that said, I mean, I think what undermines everything you've just said there, Sir Bill, is, well, there is that hockey match that may take place between the Russians and Americans, which apparently is such a big win.
Well, and on top of that, all we've seen so far in this whole sort of what I would call quote negotiation, because there hasn't been any negotiation from the Russian side, is effectively a thawing in the relationship between the United States and Russia, in which the new U.S. administration, the Trump administration, is effectively giving Putin this gift for nothing. Putin has done nothing to deserve it. And what is he getting? He's getting recognition from the U.S. president. He's getting, they're opening embassy or reopening embassies. They're playing hockey. They're doing all this kind of stuff. It's the absolute wrong message to send to Putin. Instead, what should be done is a tripling down of military aid to Ukraine, to give the Ukrainians the full latitude to send those missiles anywhere they want in Russia, which Biden didn't do. And to cut off all economic flows out of Russia, so bring Putin to his knees. That's what should be done right now.
Yeah. And we know that it's never been done. The economic sanctions still haven't really hit hard enough. They've hit in lots of different ways, but we know that Russia is still able to sell its oil and its gas, and lots of it ends up in India and then just gets sold back to Germany in Europe anyway. And again, that could be cut off. If there was a will, there would be a way. But this is the thing. Is this an issue where US military, strategic and diplomatic interests differ from those of Europe? Because obviously we have an interest in containing Vladimir Putin, which is rather greater and more immediate and geographically close than the US has. We have that big, beautiful ocean that Donald Trump talked about. So is there actually a difference of our strategic interest between Europe and America that Donald Trump is acknowledging publicly in a way that Biden and other administrations haven't? Or is this just simply down to the personality of Donald Trump and his belief that he is the ultimate deal maker, the art of the deal? He wants a Nobel Peace Prize for bringing this war to an end. How much of this is something that is strategic and geopolitical, and how much of this is personality politics?
Well, none of this makes any sense from the outside. So let's just start with the basic U.S. interests. And do American people want the United States government to be aligned with Putin, or do they want the United States to be aligned with Zelensky in Ukraine? 92% of Americans hate Putin. They think he's a bad guy. And I would say that same percentage of members of the House of Representatives and the Senate on the Republican side. So it's not a politically popular issue. It's certainly not a very helpful issue in terms of world peace. As you're talking about with your previous call-in people, if we have to put peacekeepers on the ground in Ukraine and they're fired upon, then either they don't fire back and they get fired on again, or we end up in a war with Russia. What's the best way of avoiding that is for Ukraine to be given the full capabilities to fight back, so we don't have to. And so it's and when I say that, I say we, I mean the collective we, which is we are allies here in the UK and Europe. We are at least up until this moment still officially allies of the United States. And it's in the United States' geopolitical national interest to support its allies. Yeah. It doesn't. None of this makes any sense.
Well, this is it. Do you believe that it's only Donald Trump who is really pushing this narrative, and also, the extreme, the alt-right on social media who are pushing this whole, Zelensky dictator, Kremlin talking points all over social media, and Donald Trump's believing that, or just got his own worldview on this? Do you believe that the likes of the Secretary of State Marco Rubio and large numbers of Republicans, indeed many of the military advisors to the president and the military, the chiefs of the military in the United States, do you think they are on side with what Trump is doing, or do you think they, like all the European leaders, are tearing their hair out at this?
I'm sure they're tearing their hair out. I know Marco Rubio well. He was one of the most supportive people in the U.S. Senate when he was a senator on issues relating to Vladimir Putin. Yeah. I can't imagine the turmoil, the inner turmoil that he must be going through having taken the job of Secretary of State and having to do something which is absolutely against his own personal beliefs, interests, and morality. And I'm sure the same thing is true with Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, General Kellogg, and many other people working in the State Department and so on. This is, and you know, who supports this? Tucker Carlson supports this position towards Russia. Elon Musk supports this position towards Russia. J.D. Vance does. Peter Thiel, who's behind J.D. Vance, and various other characters like that who are all in this very narrow group of people that don't represent the interests of Americans and don't represent the interests of world peace. And why Trump is doing this, you know, only time will tell, and the truth will eventually come out. But it's truly not helpful for our interests here in the UK, for sure.
Yeah, well, that's certainly the case. Do you believe, as many are suspecting, that Donald Trump, you know, it may just be his own personal ego and just, you know, I promise I'm going to bring peace, I'm going to bring peace at any cost. Do you think that he's genuinely concerned about Ukrainian men being put through, as he says, the meat grinder? Do you think there is some issue that he genuinely does believe Vladimir Putin? He thinks they've got some weird bromance. He thinks that he can do a deal with him. Or, as many have been suggesting, and I don't think it's that much of a stretch of a conspiracy theory, that Russia has some sort of compromat, as it's called, on Donald Trump, and that he's doing Putin's bidding. Where do you stand on all of that? You've dealt with Putin yourself. He's an ex-KGB man. What do you make of all of that?
Well, one of the things I learned in my life as an investor before I became a human rights activist is that everybody behaves rationally. Nobody does something that's irrational. What Trump is doing right now looks on the surface to be irrational, but it's not. It's rational. And so then the question is, if everyone's behaving rationally and someone is doing something that doesn't look like it makes sense, then we don't have all the information. What is that information? I don't know what that information is. And of course, there's a whole industry of people speculating with conspiracy theories. I don't think it's even helpful at this point to speculate about why he's doing it. All we need to do is look at what he's doing and then figure out what's in our interest in terms of responding. And in my opinion, that means that we have to really go much harder in terms of supporting Ukraine. And one of the ways of doing that without digging into our own pocketbooks is to confiscate Putin's money that's held in the West, that's frozen in the West.
And you were actually instrumental in advising Western governments in terms of how to actually impose those sanctions, because you'd been, you're involved as an investor. You've been involved in an awful lot of these financial dealings, in terms of what was going on with Russia. So that money is all just sitting there. It's earning interest at the moment. There has been some talk about the interest at least being given to Zelensky to help the war effort. But you're talking about literally the hundreds of billions that are just sitting there in European bank accounts.
So I've been on this campaign for 3 years since the war started, saying that instead of the taxpayer paying to support Ukraine, Putin should support Ukraine. And the money is sitting in the West, frozen in the West. It was frozen a week after the war started. There's $300 billion. And I've met with our foreign secretary and our previous foreign secretary and more than 24 foreign ministers from Europe to make the case that this money should be confiscated. And originally everyone said, no, that's outrageous, that's impossible, it can't happen. Then eventually they said, well, maybe we can take the interest. And we've started taking the interest on that money. But I'm saying that the numbers are now so big of what Ukraine needs, particularly if the U.S. steps out, which they appear to be doing, that we need to take the entire amount of money. And I believe, based on everything that I've read and heard and discussed over the last couple of weeks, that that now the world is getting there, that the German government and our government and various other governments are getting there. Yeah,
absolutely. But certainly I would massively support that. But in terms of coming back to your knowledge of Vladimir Putin as the man, what do you think he is going to do next, other than sit and wait for the next offer with nothing in return from Donald Trump? But what do you think he will do next? Because one of my big concerns, I know a lot of Western governments' concerns, is if he does get to keep territory, Crimea, Donbass region in Ukraine, he'll come back for more in Ukraine, and once he's got Ukraine, he will come for the Baltic states, other countries, Moldova. He's made no secret of his belief about bringing back Mother Russia to previous territorial state. What do you think he will do next?
Well, as you said before, you don't have to be all that creative about predicting what he's going to do. Just listen to what he says, and he said all that stuff, and it's pretty straightforward. There's no mystery here. That's what he intends to do. And for what it's worth, he hasn't made much progress in getting Ukraine.
No.
They've lost, according to Ukrainian estimates, 898,000 soldiers to either death or disability. And if you look on the map, it's not that significant. No. They lost like 200,000 soldiers to move 50 miles. I think the estimates are it would take them 174 years at this pace to get all of Ukraine. And so, this is going to be going on for a very long time. And the key is to give the Ukrainians whatever they need to stop him. And if we stop him coming into Ukraine, we stop him from coming into Poland and Estonia and all that, because he's going to be busy with Ukraine. And so Ukrainians deserve every bit of our support. And even if we have to dig deep into our pockets, they deserve that, because we don't want to have, British young men fighting Putin. And the best way to avoid that is to let the Ukrainians do the job, which they're doing brilliantly and bravely.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Sir Bill Browder, Putin's #1 foreign enemy, head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. Claire Pissell, what do you want to say about what Sir Bill had to say?
Well, I think he's absolutely right with the sanctions. They need to be brought down hard.
India needs to be told, pick a side.
Absolutely
pick does.
And it's the only way they're going to learn.
Yeah,
so that needs to happen.
He knows Vladimir Putin. He knows how he operates. And again, I know. We've got the hockey match, though, guys. Got the hockey match. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Obviously, you don't have to agree with us. Love to hear if you completely disagree. Let's have a conversation about it. That's what we're here for, the debate. Up next, we are going to be talking about that benefit crackdown. Is it a crackdown? Are people going to die? And is it terribly cruel because it's too extensive? Or is it really not going far enough? That's up next. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
that on LinkedIn. That's what every politician apparently now does, with varying results, it seems.
You also missed out the one perhaps most relevant piece of my CV for this interview, which is that I was a Secretary of State for Work and Pensions.
Well, absolutely
so
right.
I have grappled with these problems.
Yeah, and my local MP, of course, I should say. You know, we can't forget that.
Most importantly of all.
That's the most important thing of all. Listen, I mean, every government has wrestled with this one, haven't they? They've all given it a go and tried to find a way around.
There is no requirement for him to go anywhere. He shouldn't go anywhere. If he does, it should be paid for by people. You know, if, for example, the Parliament of, I don't know, Burkina Faso decides that it wants a lesson in how brilliantly the Brits run their parliament and would like him to come over, they would pay for it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pearsall's also with us. We're joined now by Michael Simmons. He's economics editor at The Spectator. A very good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about benefit reforms. Benefit crackdown. Long trailed. Lots of information about what they were, what they weren't going to do. We had a load of Labour MPs yesterday saying, people are going to die. This is far too much. Then we're told it's going to only save 5 billion quid. Was this a benefit crackdown that was really severe, or did it not go far enough?
I think it's not gone far enough. If you look at the Department for Work and Pensions' own forecasts, in the time before these changes come in, most of the changes don't actually come in until 2028. Yeah. In that time, the bill for sickness benefit was already going up 15 billion. So it's still going to go up by 10, which is such a massive surge. The number of people on the benefit is going to go up by nearly 1 million as well. Yep. So they've slowed the surge, but to me, it seems more like OBR-driven policy making to get a number down that's going to fit in with a fiscal headroom problem that the Chancellor has, rather than
these sort of kind of made-up rules, because they are made up, really. Rules ahead of the spring statement, and Rachel Reeves basically, the economy is not looking good. We've had, apparently unexpected, I'd thought highly expected, downturn in the economy as a result of government policies, and they haven't got enough money. They're going to have to try and save some. Is it spending cuts, tax rises, or more borrowing, or a combination of the three? But here's the thing. Labour backbenchers absolutely up in arms, the usual suspects about how awful this is. Even the chair of the Work and Pensions Select Committee was saying, this shouldn't be done, but making these numbers match shouldn't be done on the backs of the poorest people. But most of the savings they're looking to get are from preventing people who are not yet on disability benefits from getting on disability benefits because they don't actually need them, which doesn't seem to me to be particularly cruel.
Yeah, I think that's right. And look, whenever you do anything that looks for savings in the benefit system, I think, unfortunately, you are going to take some money away from people who, genuinely need it. Yes. But the big problem is, the rise in mental health, people getting onto these assessments too easily. So I think it's a good thing that they're going to tighten up the PIP assessments. I think what's actually really a strong point that they've came out with yesterday, and one of the things that hadn't leaked in the weeks running up to it, is this idea about making it harder for young people to get onto these benefits. So the minimum age you have to be to get the health-related top-up to UC is going to go up to 22. And that's to stop this problem where, people finish school, people finish training, go straight onto the out-of-work category of benefits, and then essentially live a life where they never work. So I think... And
not be requested to work. But basically, they'll just go on the dole instead. They'll be on universal credit.
Exactly. Once you get into that not fit for work category, which is going to eventually be abolished, you tend to just stay in that, and there's no pressure on you to look for work. So stopping young people getting into that category, I think, is where the one bit of it.
But really, we should stop everybody from getting to that category if they're not actually part of the category. Now, here's the key thing. So from November 2026, people will need to score a minimum of 4 points in at least one activity to qualify for the daily living element of PIP, which is kind of the biggest part of it. The current standard rate is if people score between 8 and 11 points overall, you get an enhanced rate from 12 points. Now, so what does that mean in actual English?
Well, this is the tricky thing, right? Who knows? And this is why I think it does play into, they've just tried to change the rules to add up to this 5 billion figure that they'd briefed the press about. Yeah. Because it's hard to, the way PIP assessment works is there's criteria about how you live your life. So can you wash your upper body? Can you wash your lower body? And that works out to scoring different points. Yeah. I don't think any government minister could come on television or go to the House of Commons and justify how each score, measures to each bit of the assessment. So it seems to me like they've the scoring to get to this 5 million figure. Yeah,
exactly. But that's the thing. I mean, one would argue, again, a lot of it is you telling someone, we know a lot of these assessments have been over the phone. Now they're saying they're going to move more of them to being in person. Well, that's only going to work if you've got the people making the assessments in the office, which they are not largely in now anymore. They're working from home. But also, crucially, a lot of it is, especially when it comes to mental health, it is somebody's personal view. Do you struggle to do this? Yes, I do. I mean, unless you're being asked to prove it, unless you literally, I don't know, set fire to the building and say, well, let's see if you can run or not. I mean, you're not literally going to be able to prove it, are you? So I would be very surprised, I bet you anything after these reforms, that there will be no difference whatsoever in the number of people getting these benefits.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, because they don't do anything to tackle the mental health problem. And the issue there is government-wide, but also a society thing, that we've changed from thinking that the best way to deal with stress, the best way to deal with anxiety is basically to get on with life, to put one foot in front of the other and to go to work. I mean, work's incredible for your mental health. If we now have an idea in society where if you have anxiety, if you have depression, you just lock yourself away and stay at home, then that number is just going to keep on climbing, and we just cannot afford that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing. It is interesting also, even the Labour front bench talking about this and justifying it. It's amazing. If the Tories had announced this, which they should have a long time ago, this problem's happened under their watch, certainly since lockdown. They've had plenty of years since lockdown to tackle it and failed to. The Labour lot who announced this yesterday would have been up in arms.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if the boot was on the other foot, they'd be shouting about austerity. Ken Loach would be making a film about it.
Absolutely.
So we are just in the political reality is that because people don't question Labour's motives in the way that they question the Conservative motives, they have the capital to make these moves. But I think you're right that they haven't gone far enough.
No, absolutely. And again, it's not a question of whether the rights and wrongs we want to know. We ain't got the money. We're not going to have more money. The situation's only going to get worse age-wise and demographically in terms of the number of young people. We cannot afford to have 1 million young people not working, and we're paying them thousands. And again, people think these benefits are really low. They're not. They open a world of other benefits. And once you get your housing benefit fully paid, that's it. Game over. The taxpayer is going to be, up to their knees in debt. Michael Simmons from The Spectator, thank you so much for joining us. Do come back on the show soon. I'm going to get Claire's thoughts on this, and I want to hear your thoughts as well. Lots of calls coming in on Ukraine, but I want to hear from you. Those benefit reforms, were they terrible and cruel, or did they not go far enough? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. It's great to have your company and indeed the company of Claire Pearsall, former Conservative government advisor. You just get used to the fact that I always say, yeah, but what about your lot? That's basically what I saw all my questions. Yeah, but your lot are just as much to blame.
But it's kind of what I'm here for, really, isn't it?
It is what you're here for. I mean, you know, this is just, you know, your sacrificial lamb every week. But anyway, always appreciate you joining us. So much more to talk about, including Ukraine. Lots of your calls coming in about Putin rejecting Trump's plan for a ceasefire. Instead, he demanded that the West ends all aid to Ukraine, not just the US, but the whole of the West. No military aid, no intelligence, and basically, we're told, a frank phone call between the two men didn't end up leading to anything meaningful at all. No wonder today Zelensky has pointed out in a meeting with the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, that you basically can't trust on Vladimir Putin. Yeah, what a surprise. Also, we're going to talk about J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States. He said in a speech yesterday that many countries, including, and he named Britain, is stagnating because of its high levels of immigration. He said that the West got lazy by using cheap labour as a substitute for higher productivity. I mean, he's quite right on that, isn't he? Keir Starmer has also said that the soaring cost of sickness and disability benefits is having a devastating impact on the public finances. This comes after the Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall announced that £5 billion package of welfare cuts. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Plus, this is so painful. This happens every time we get a Labour government, does it not? GCSE exams are expected to be slashed to reduce pupil stress in an overhaul of the national curriculum, which is already being dumbed down. This is being ordered by the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson. I mean, let's just have the lowest possible expectations for our kids. That'll do well in a changing world. Brilliant. I'm sure that'll work out well. I want to hear your thoughts on all of those stories. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Claire, I want to start with benefits because we were just talking to Mike Simmons from The Spectator. I love that. So, I mean, certainly if you're watching, you know, the mainstream media, BBC and Sky and ITV, the focus as always on these benefit stories, and this is why the Tories didn't do a lot of this. It's why Labour is so wary of it and are preparing the ground for it. £5 billion in cuts to the disability benefits, given up on this idea of a freeze, making it harder for you to get on it in the first place, saying that people under the age of 22 shouldn't be able to be on this and basically be written off for life already. What's not to like, I would say. I don't think it'll work. I don't think they'll even achieve the £5 billion in cuts that they say they'll achieve. People will find a way around the system. I don't think they're going to get loads of people in for reassessments. I don't think they're going to be able to do them in person. I think the whole thing is an absolute charade, but it's about making the numbers look good ahead of the spring statement next week. And either way, even if it did work, it wouldn't be going far enough because we are in crisis, not just economically, but demographically. And I just think, morally, I suppose, is a fair word in our country in terms of the relationship and the deal between the state and other taxpayers and ourselves and our children and our expectations about, well, what we're supposed to contribute and what our duties are as citizens in this country. I was raised, and that Marxist idea, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Yeah, everyone's forgot about the first bit, okay? Yeah. And it seems to me that we are in a very, very difficult state, and no one in public life is actually gripping this problem by the horns.
No, they're not. And when you look at young people, how can we allow millions of young people to finish school and then just sit there and expect the state to pick up the tab?
Let's talk about parenting.
That's going to be my point, because you certainly wouldn't allow your daughter to sit around not doing anything. I wouldn't allow my son
I'd change the locks.
Sit around.
I'm quite serious. I'd change the locks.
Yeah,
off you go.
You want something, you have to work for it. And whilst I will look after him until such times as he can look after himself, and I will always be there, but he wants things, he's going to have to earn the money to buy them.
But that's actually being a loving, responsible parent. Part of our job is to love our children, look after them, care for them. Yes, help them clean their teeth and all that stuff, healthy diet things. But it's also about raising them with decent morals, and it's about raising them to be responsible citizens. And again, look, I've got friends who are going through the trauma of having children who are really psychologically, traumatised by... lockdown really hit a lot of kids who were otherwise fine. and and exacerbated problems for a lot of kids who were already having problems. And there, but for the grace of God, we don't have children in that situation. But I'm very sympathetic to people who do. Do I think that the solution to that is to write those children off for life with PIP payments? No. Absolutely not. I would say that is immoral to do. Yeah. Not just for the child, but for society at large.
Yeah, it is. And don't dumb down education either, because you want these people to strive. You want young people to grow up and be purposeful and be taxpayers of the future.
Yeah.
Don't dumb down the exams. Don't say it's all right to sit around in the garden in the sunshine and not work.
Except we did. We kind of did say that for quite a long time, didn't we?
And we have to reverse that. We have to now start being a little bit strict with our kids. I mean, there's a shock. Actually tell them to get up and get out of bed.
You say we, but I mean, most of us have been doing that. And again, the parents who don't do that, well, but our kids are then going to be paying for their kids. Yeah. I do just find it extraordinary that we have 9 million economically inactive people in the working age between 16 and 64. 9 million. We've got 13 million pensioners, and we've got just 27 million private sector workers. We've also got 6 million public sector workers. And although they work and they pay taxes as well, nevertheless, their wages are being paid by the taxes of the private sector workers. So you've got basically 27 million people working in the private sector supporting all these other people. The numbers don't add up. The numbers simply, it's not tenable now. It ain't going to be tenable in 5 years, in 10 years, 30 years, it's going to be tenable in 50 years. And when with the demographic changes we've got, people having fewer kids, we are going to be in absolute dire straits. People have to wake up to this, like dealing with social care, dealing with pension reform, dealing with the demographic issues, dealing with benefits reform, dealing with how much we spend on defence. All these things, our political leaders and our world-class civil service, they have just completely and utterly failed to do their job for the last 20 years, 30 years even.
Yeah, and I think the Labour government have now just backed themselves into a corner by saying that they're not going to raise the 3 main taxes on individuals. Yeah. Well, where's the money coming from?
Yeah, exactly. Those are actually the fairest ways of doing
that's
things.
The fairest way.
Well, again, also, if you want benefits like you could get in France or Germany, that's fine. But you know what? They do actually pay much higher taxes.
Yes.
The average person an average earner in France or Germany or Sweden, they pay much higher taxes than we do. That is part of the deal. And again, we're told, the people on the left yesterday, the MPs talking about a wealth tax and 1% wealth tax. Yeah, well, again, a lot of that wealth often it's not sitting in a bank account. It's a property that someone owns. But you know what? You can do that. And every country that has tried it has dropped it within a few years because they actually make less money than the money they lose from all the people who go, adios then. Because the funny thing about wealthy people is they're really, really mobile and they just move to another country.
Well, they will do. Of course they will. If they're going to protect their assets, they'll just go.
But also, those people have already paid a lot of tax.
Yes.
Is the top 1% pay 29% of all tax in this country?
Yeah, but
I think they're paying enough. I don't think we're going to be able to get any more out of them.
But it's a really easy argument for those on the left, is a wealth tax.
Evil poor.
Absolutely, and that's what they do, and they sort of wring their hands together and say, well, what about the poor children? What about the pensioners?
Yeah.
What, the ones you've just hit with winter fuel allowance cuts?
Yeah,
those ones.
That's the thing. In terms of, Labour voters, and we can see that massive plummet. I mean, there's a lot fewer votes for Labour than Labour were expecting from the polls on the day. A lot of people going, you know what, I can't do this. We went down to 34%. They plummeted down. Sometimes you got Reform ahead of them in the polls, still ahead of the Tories, admittedly, but not looking very good. I mean, Keir Starmer's had a little bit of a bump from his performance on the world stage, and I've been quite impressed with his how he's handled Donald Trump as well. I think he's walked a very, very difficult tightrope on that front. But at the end of the day, I predicted wrongly, I would say, that Keir Starmer, they wouldn't actually have the money to do a lot of things they wanted to do. They'd end up doing a lot of things that would upset people on the right far more, but also they wouldn't please people on the left. But actually, they've ended up pleasing no one at all.
Yes, it's been quite fascinating that they've managed to come down on the wrong side of practically every argument.
Yeah. It's almost like they're really rubbish at government.
Do you think? Do you think they put all of that effort into
winning an election? And my God, that was a low bar after your lot.
We can be better. We will rebuild. Just putting it out there.
Did you read that from your phone? Did you read that?
What do you think? I've got a message.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because again, the benefits from. We had lots of people getting in touch in the last week when we were discussing this, saying, I've got this problem, or my family's got members got this problem. We need the benefits. Like, well, no one's asking to take it away from you, and we need a very good appeals process if people are unable to get it. But I mean, the fact that 1 in 6 cars in this country that's currently sold, new cars, is on the Motability scheme. I'm just why do you need a new car? Why do you need? I've never owned a new car in my life. I don't understand why you'd need it. Why does it need to be replaced every 3 years? I don't replace my car every 3 years. I just find these things like, well, I'm sorry, it's not a company car. Yeah, I'm sorry, no, but it depends. You right, replace your car, but I mean, you know, people have got jobs where that car is absolutely the number one. I mean, I barely use mine, so I don't need to. But it's no, but there's just things like you're not entitled to that stuff. I don't get I don't understand who came up with this stuff and why they thought the taxpayers should be funding it.
No, I mean,
it's clearly a scam.
I think there are people that it works for, but I don't think that you need top-of-the-range, high-class cars.
No, exactly. You don't need a BMW.
No. I mean, you know, I'd like to have a Mercedes, I'd like to have a Jaguar, I'd like to have a BMW, but I don't have one because I can't afford it. I might chop my car in every 3 years, but that's my choice and I pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. You can do whatever you want. You can change your car every week if you want. Have a box-fresh car as well as box-fresh trainers. I don't care as long as I'm not being asked to pay for it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Let's talk more about Ukraine. Talked to Bill Browder a little bit earlier. And again, a man who knows Vladimir Putin. He knows what he's like. It seems to me this key issue with, as he pointed out, you know, this phone call, I mean, absolute and utter humiliation for Donald Trump that Putin kept him waiting, kept his own advice. The fact that he kept Waltz, his advisor, his emissary, effectively waiting for 8 hours last week, that alone was 2 fingers up to Donald Trump. Vladimir Putin just keeps basically saying, yeah, I'm not moving. These are my red lines. And basically, Trump keeps giving more and more and more away and comes back and says, oh, that was a really successful, productive phone call. He's got absolutely nothing out of it at all of any use, apart from a possible US-Russian hockey match. You know, even the prisoner exchange was going to happen anyway. These happen regularly anyway. Do you think the main issue here is that Vladimir Putin is a wily, cunning ex-KGB fox, and that Donald Trump thinks he's much cleverer than he actually is?
I think that's a fair assessment. I really do. I mean, Putin, I dislike the man intensely. He is a dictator.
He's a murderer.
He's very clever. And his whole KGB background leads him to be very wily, to be very sort of under the radar at a lot of things. He just gets
he reads people. He can clearly read people. Do you remember when Nigel Farage was attacked for saying that he's saying he admired Nigel, he admired Vladimir Putin, but again, he was very clear. The full sentence was, you know, obviously I don't agree with him on anything, but I admire him in terms of his ability to get his way, in terms of the way that he worked his way around all the, you know, the pussyfooting Western democratic leaders. He admired him, and he was making a perfectly fair point. I'm in awe of how he operates. I despise the man. I think he is genuinely somebody, if you had the opportunity to assassinate him, you would be immoral not to take that opportunity. He is a murderer. He is an awful. I wouldn't even say evil. I think he's a psychopath. I think he's a psychopath. He has no interest or understanding of other people existing or their needs, or he could not care less. 900,000 Russian young men to the slaughter, maimed for life. He cares not a jot.
Yeah.
But when you're up against someone like that, you need to know how to deal with someone like that.
You do.
I don't think you can reason with him. This is like someone trying to start a fight with you in the pub on a Saturday night. There are people you can reason with, and there are people that you just need to grab a bottle and hold your own with.
Yeah, absolutely. And when somebody is as unapologetic as Putin is, he just sort of shrug his shoulders and walk off in a different direction. And it's interesting that he sees peacekeepers, boots on the ground, as being an act of aggression.
Yeah.
But didn't consider invading a country
to be an act of aggression. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, there you go. Exactly. I was with my production team looking at me like, have you never been in a broken bottle fight? You guys haven't lived. I've been going to the wrong places over the years. Anyway. On another note, I do want to hear from you on that as well, 0344 499 1000. Let's also talk about ministers are going to be forcing firms, we understand, to reveal their ethnicity pay gap. This after the gender pay gap. Again, I've always been opposed to that as well. Was it Ryanair had a terrible gender pay gap because lots of their pilots who are highly paid because they're highly skilled, were on much higher pay than most of their cabin crew who were women, who are not as lovely as they are and as hard as that job is, not necessarily highly skilled in the same way a pilot is. I'm just hoping I get good service on my next flight. But I mean, that's not sexism. That's just facts. Those pilot jobs are just as open to the women. Now, do we genuinely believe that there are jobs right now which are not being given to black or Asian or any other ethnic minority in this country people because of the colour of their skin?
I think that they will be rare cases.
I mean, there's still some racists, let's not pretend there aren't.
Yeah, and there will be cases where that is very much in evidence, but I don't think that this is for the majority at all, and I don't see why we need to force businesses, especially private businesses, to
hire
fess up their details and hire certain people that the government of the day seems fit to tell
especially
them.
what I find really, really fascinating is, I mean, again, people talk about absolute nonsense on the gender pay gap. I mean, they talk about, women only earn 75%. That's rubbish. That's if you're comparing women who work part-time after having kids. They actually, it's a mother pay gap, actually, what it is. And by the way, that's normally largely down to women choosing to work part-time because they want to be with their kids. How lovely. How lovely women get the choice. But the extraordinary thing is, of course, is that actually, according to the National Office of Statistics, you probably know what they're talking about, in 2022, if you're black, whether Caribbean, African, British-born, they earn on average around 6% less now than white employees. That's been consistent for 10 years. Asian employees, Asian British employees, earned around 3% more than white employees. So what we've got is a situation where we've got a load of white people. I mean, this is the background, isn't it? A load of white people are massively, massively racist against black people. But they're also massively keen on Asian people because they've got very distinctive racism, I mean, and again, it just doesn't make sense. Is it not the case? Again, I think you could explain virtually all of that disparity, not all of it, but virtually all of it, by socioeconomic differences. For instance, again, I'd be very surprised if, for instance, people of African origin, their family of African heritage, as opposed to Afro-Caribbean heritage, would not be facing the same issues. Different Asian countries, people from India have much higher, and China, much higher incomes than people from Pakistan or Bangladesh. A lot of this is down to family unit. Afro-Caribbean kids, 40 or 45%, I think, are in single-parent families, living in poor areas. That's not the case for Asian families at all, and you can see the impact of that in terms of educational achievement. This stuff can be explained by something that is completely irrelevant to race.
Yeah, completely, and it is a social background, a social construct, and also just being able to negotiate pay terms or conditions with your company. And it doesn't matter what your colour or your ethnicity or your gender is. If you have that ability, you will do well. So I think that people need to sort of almost pull themselves up by bootstraps, stop blaming other people.
Exactly, but also to turn up, work hard, do the job.
Absolutely.
I mean, I keep watching shows with people. I don't know what I can do to make my boss happy. I mean, you can turn up on time and not oversleep and just do the job you've been asked to do. I mean, there's some mind-blowing ideas that might catch on one day. I don't know. Anyway, love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Up next, we're going to take more of your calls. We're going to take a very, very quick break. We'll be back with those calls in just a moment. This is Talk.
that on LinkedIn. That's what every politician apparently now does, with varying results, it seems.
You also missed out the one perhaps most relevant piece of my CV for this interview, which is that I was a Secretary of State for Work and Pensions.
Absolutely right.
I have grappled with these problems.
Yeah, and my local MP, of course, I should say. You know, we can't forget that.
Most importantly of all.
That's the most important thing of all. Listen, I mean, every government has wrestled with this one, haven't they? They've all given it a go and tried to find a way around.
There is no requirement for him to go anywhere. He shouldn't go anywhere. If he does, it should be paid for by people. You know, if, for example, the Parliament of, I don't know, Burkina Faso decides to...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's see how much common sense there is on the phones right now. Let's go straight to the phone lines, 0344 499 1000. And in a couple of minutes, I'll get some messages coming in as well on Ukraine. But what's your reaction to Putin rejecting Trump's plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine? He's demanded that the West ends all aid to Ukraine, military aid, intelligence help, you name it, before he'd agree to a proper ceasefire. Your reaction to that? Well, let's talk to Andrew in Hertfordshire. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Julia. Crackerjack, glad to see you're back fighting fit.
Oh, you know, I sort of am. Luckily, I still have a cough button, so I can do my coughing mostly without you hearing it. But this one is lingering, I'm not going to lie.
So, look, the reality of this whole thing is the worst actual negotiation in my lifetime was Gordon Brown when he told the markets he was going to sell the gold.
Oh, yes.
Now that's been... this is far worse than that. When Putin tortured, press the button, when Putin tortured Angela Merkel with the dog, you saw actually what he was.
I don't remember that. What was that?
So she hated dogs, so she'd been attacked by them. She goes to negotiate with Putin, and he brings a dog in, and he sits and he enjoys watching her being clearly
tortured. Uncomfortable. Yeah. I mean, he's a sadist. The man's a sadist.
Yeah. So if you think about it, he turns up late to Trump. The critical thing there is what he said initially. He never apologised to Trump because he's got Trump in his hand.
Yeah.
Barack Obama lives in his head. He wants that peace prize. And if you look at it...
Which Obama didn't deserve, by the way.
Yeah, that, you know, he just sent the envelope back marked yes. But if you actually look at it, Putin has given away what's hurting him. The energy, the arms supplies. If Trump was strong, he'd just come out, right, we're sending more arms.
Yep.
They can fire them where they like. And we are now away from this because Putin doesn't want peace. But he's not, he's weak. And, you know, you've asked it a couple of times. I do think somewhere in the back, some Russian financer gave him money for the hotels. I can't prove it. That, and Putin's got that marker. And he knows he can play it.
But again, I don't think anyone would be shocked by anything. Donald Trump, remember in 2016, he said he reckons he could shoot someone dead on Fifth Avenue and it wouldn't hurt him. Even the stuff about the prostitutes and the hotel room and the video, I don't even think that would damage Vladimir Putin. There must be something more, or he just genuinely believes that, you know, he's a wily businessman and he reads people well, and that he can get Putin to do what he wants. I mean, that's perfectly feasible as well.
Yeah, but he's good locally, he's good nationally, he's got some... That, when he signed away, you know, girls in sport, that was brilliant.
Yep.
The bloke to speak to, and you get him on as a guest, is Malcolm Rifkin. Look at the quality of him. Trump is a person that can negotiate cheap laundry for the bed linen in hotels. But on a geopolitical stage, he's out of his depth.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely think he is out of his depth on this, and it's interesting to talk to Sir Bill Browder, who knows him and deals with these people on the world stage, that actually, you know, the people surrounding him, the Secretary of State and others, and the military chiefs, he believes will be tearing their hair out and actually don't agree with this policy, but are going along with it. I'm assuming they're going along with it on the basis that they know it won't work. They know that Putin won't give in. They won't be, and Trump will be forced to give his show of strength, which is to give more aid to Ukraine. I'm assuming that that's what they're waiting for.
You would hope so, Julia, but it's like the Hans Christian Andersen, isn't it? At what point? It's only the little boy that points it out, isn't it? He's not wearing any clothes.
Absolutely. Andrew, great call. Really good to hear from you. Thank you so much. Just going to get some more messages coming in on Ukraine as well. Your reaction to this this phone call yesterday. James says he's making Trump look like an absolute idiot. So much for the art of the deal. Tony says he agrees the US should stop all aid to Ukraine. Again, look at what? Because Zelensky is a dictator and Vladimir Putin's the victim. I mean, yeah. Bella says it's clear that tensions are escalating. What will the West do to poke the bear next? Again, poking the Russian bear. What? A country wants to defend itself against Putin. I told you that cough was still there. Anyway, basically, says Phil, this is the UK and EU's problem. America wants to stay out of it. Belinda says we should be using the aid to rebuild Ukraine, not feed the war. I've no point rebuilding Ukraine if it's going to be taken, more territory is going to be taken. Lee says, yes, end it. Most of the money has been laundered anyway. This is I think he's talking about the Russian money that's in Western banks. I mean, we've basically been dealing with laundered money. The British banking system is entirely based on Russian and dodgy Middle East laundered money. Alex says, of course, that would be a demand. Donald Trump being played like a puppet by Vladimir Putin. Anna says he's correct. Putin is correct to push for what he can get to get the West off his border. What the heck has it got to do with us anyway? Yeah, Anna. I think a lot of people said that in 1938 as well. Good luck with that, but there we are. Let's go to Martin, who's on the line in Cambridge. Martin, you want to talk about the benefit crackdown that isn't really a benefit crackdown?
That's correct, Julie. Good to speak to you again. Yeah, basically, I mean, I have to come from at this point. I make Genghis Khan look like a bleeding heart liberal on this issue. So, I mean, it has to stop. We're bankrupting ourselves. So, I mean, we need to stop all benefits. We need to have a reset. Except for severely disabled and terminally ill and those kind of... Obviously, genuine people, we need to pay them. But I think we need to bring in something like a form of workfare for everybody else. You should fill the potholes, pick the litter, that kind of thing. And if people still don't sign up for that, then we create national service. We are having societal breakdown in this country. It's a largesse on a grand scale, and it's totally out of order. Yeah. I mean, and then we've got to stop automatic payments. If you get benefits, like we did when we were growing up, Julie, you went to the dole office with your ID card or whatever, and then you get your stamp and you get your payment. Yeah. I mean, just banging money into people's bank accounts. I mean, there's numerous claims from people who we don't know who these people are. And it's just got to stop.
Yeah, completely agree on that side of things. Also, you hear these things, could you live on £70 a week? No, because I'd get a job. But anyway, they aren't. They get all these other benefits, like the housing benefit. Most people, especially on lower the income, the huge amount of your outgoings is going on your rent. Well, if that's all paid for by you and me, then you're not living on £70 a week, are you? Anyway, I'm with you in terms of, I just think that benefits should be for, dire need. And for people who are, between jobs, you've paid your stamp, you've made redundant, while you're looking for work for the next month or two, while you're waiting for another job to start, you need benefits. I've got no issue with that, but it's got to be time limited, and it's got to be, if you're not taking a job, then you don't get any money. And as you say, let's get people doing something useful so they're turning up every day. I'm all in favour. I'm all in favour of the workfare, certainly for young people. Absolutely, for young people that got no business sitting at home watching daytime telly and playing on their Xbox all day.
When I started, I got paid £25 YTS.
Yeah,
and
YTS. I remember that. Yeah,
I know. And I had to move down to Oxfordshire because I was getting involved with motorsport, and my weekly bill was £45. I worked as a bin man during the summer holidays when I was at college to save up money to fund me while I was down there. Yeah, I got nothing. Nobody got nothing in those days.
Well, no, I hate to tell you, quite a lot of people did, but there's way too many people. And again, medicalising everybody for normal human emotion is definitely a big issue. Martin, I agree with an awful lot of that. I'd love to hear what you think as well. 0344 499 1000. Coming up, we're going to be taking a quick break and we can talk to Paul Richards. He's a former Labour Special Advisor. Do those benefit reforms go too far? Not far enough? And was J.D. Vance right that Britain is stagnating because of mass immigration of low-skilled, cheap labour? That's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pearsall still with me. Get her thoughts on what our next guest has to say in a moment. He's Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor. A very good morning to you, Paul.
Good morning to you.
Thank you so much for joining us. So are you one of the Labour folk today who is cheering on Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary, to doing very vital moral reforms to help our public finances and indeed to help get people back, into the world of work by cutting disability benefits? Or are you one of those saying, everyone's going to die, this is awful and evil, this is the sort of thing the Tories would do? Where do you stand?
Well, you won't be shocked to learn that I'm broadly supportive of what Liz Kendall is trying to achieve there. It's quite a brave thing to do, to take on the welfare system, because you do get these howls of outrage the minute you start to do anything at all to it. But I think we can all agree, everyone that's been phoning in today and your own commentary there, we can all agree the system does not work. It is broken. There's a perverse incentive for people to sign on the sick, even if they're not actually genuinely ill, because they get more money. And there's a whole generation of young people, 1 in 8, they reckon, who are not in education or training or in work. And so the system's broken. The question then is, what do you do? And I think Liz Kendall is attempting to do something quite
Is she going far enough,
to sort it out?
Is she going far enough? Because £5 billion is neither here nor there. In fact, we don't even know how many people will be affected and therefore how much it will cost, because those figures aren't going to be out until the OBR report along with the spring statement next week. Some of it is just about the points you have to score to be able to get onto the basic rate of personal independence payments. We have no idea whether people are going to be able to basically work their way and rig their way around this system, just as they've done it around the existing system. And by the way, it doesn't even start until late next year.
That's right. There'll always be people that try and cheat the system, and they have to be stopped. It's a small number of people who are genuinely fraudulent. There's a lot of people
now, is there? If we've got 1 million more people since the lockdown who are now claiming this, and we're completely out of kilter with the rest of the Western world in terms of the number of the percentage of our young people in particular.
Yeah, well, the only G7 country not to bounce back.
But you're saying all of those people are totally genuine? Because I think they're lying.
No, that's exactly the opposite.
You're saying there's only a small amount of fraud. I think the fraud is off the scale.
I think there's people on certain disability benefits who shouldn't be, or sickness benefits, who the perverse incentive is to sign on for that. And then, of course,
by claiming that they are disabled when they're not. That's fraud, isn't it? That's stealing.
Well, they shouldn't be on it, which is what Liz Kendall's reforms are all about.
But you said there was a small amount.
The right people to the right.
Yeah, but you said there was a small amount.
If
people are basically playing the system, claiming that they are more disabled than they actually are, i.e. they're not disabled, to get a higher benefit where they're not required to look for work, I think that's fraud. I think they're stealing from me.
The bottom line is there are lots of people not working who could be working. Some of them do want to work.
Well, they're defrauding us then, aren't they? So why do you think it's only a small level of...
that gets people into work, and that's how you cut costs. It's not just taking benefits away, it's actually getting people working and paying taxes. And there's some people need a bit of support and a bit of help, and I quite like this scheme. I don't know what you think about trying a job without losing all your benefits to see if you can do it and get...
Well, it depends, doesn't it? It depends a lot. We know there have been people, we saw that Fraser Nelson documentary about it, people who genuinely had a horrible accident, had a health problem, genuinely needed this benefit, and then say, well, okay, I'm going to go back to work, but I need to kind of test out whether I'm physically able to do it. Well, the moment you try that, you lose all your benefits.
I think that's a good idea. We can all welcome that.
I'm all in favour of that. However, it's going to be very much a personal decision and very much a subjective decision about whether or not you are able to do that job. What if you decide that actually for the extra 10 or 20 quid a week, that in terms of when you lose all the benefits that come along with PIP, for the extra 10 or 20 quid a week, it's not worth getting out of bed at 6 in the morning to go to work every day. So actually I've decided it doesn't work for me.
Well, I don't think there should be that kind of level of workfare compulsion within the system. I think you build ladders for people to climb up. I think, and changing the way that job centres work is another good idea in the Green Paper.
In what way?
Because you go in there, get some actual personalised support and advice and a bit of confidence building.
Well, you need the staff in the job centre to actually be at work then. They'd actually have to turn up in person, which they don't.
Well, I would definitely think there's a role for more face-to-face interviews and more support.
I mean, good luck with the unions doing that
as well. I think they'll accept that because, getting people back to work is the most important thing. And that's what Liz Kendall's trying to do. It's all seen through the prism of cuts, but it's not. It's about getting people into work so that we as a nation become prosperous again. We can't be prosperous with 1 in 8 young people on the dole and with millions of people on sickness benefits.
I'm all in favour.
Unsupportable.
I'm all in favour of anything that works, but I'm sure, like you and everyone else, agree that we want to make sure that the people who need these benefits get them. We are a civilised nation. It's what we do. I don't believe for a moment these changes are actually going to lead to a fundamental change that is going to make our country richer.
I think it will get people back into jobs, and I think that's the most important thing. Liz Kendall is getting attacked from all sides. People are saying, "Oh, she's been draconian." Other people saying it's not going anywhere near far enough. But I mean, that's probably a good place to be. If you're being attacked by everybody, you're probably getting it about right.
On some occasions, it's whether it actually achieves what it's supposed to achieve. Can I also talk to you about more than 1 million people who are on benefits, having their payments cut specifically, but also the UK spending £3.5 billion on public services for migrants on benefits. A lot of people who call in the show about this say, can we at least tackle the people who are actually foreigners here? We're not talking about illegal migrants getting hotels after they've arrived on their dinghy. We're talking about people who've come here who we've been told by your lot and the Tories for years they are a benefit to this country. Immigration is GDP per capita goes up, they're net contributors, but actually we're spending £3.5 billion on public services for migrants who are living on benefits. Why do we have anyone in this country living here being able to claim benefits if they're not a citizen here?
Well, it depends what kind of benefit it is, but I think a lot of those people that are migrants are, in fact, probably transitioning into the world of work. They may need a bit of support along the way, but people that come here, they tend to be the people with the most gumption, the most guts to get out.
Then why are they on
the
benefits?
Situation it is, and they're probably on their way into the labour market.
What do you mean on their way into the labour market? I mean, you can't just rock up here and just claim benefits if you're a foreigner. So maybe they've been in work or not, but I mean, why are they? I don't understand why on earth we've got an estimated 1.2 million foreign nationals claiming benefits. They've received more than £7.5 billion in universal credit, plus the £3.5 billion in terms of the public services they're using, like the schools, like hospitals, the roads, all that has to be paid for by everybody. But if if migrants are supposed to be a benefit to us, well, they can't be on benefits because then they're a drain. Why don't we just send them home?
Well, I mean, migration in general is of benefit to the economy and always has been for centuries. Those people you're describing may well be in work and taking in work benefits
but if they're in work taking
the story of immigrants is that they create businesses.
If they're in work and they're taking benefits, that means they're on low income, which means they're not net contributors.
But so many of them then do create businesses, largely because they haven't got access to the professions and so on. And of course, this country is full of businesses built by immigrants, and most of our high streets demonstrate that.
Well, there are plenty of them. We're very happy to have those people here who are creating jobs and paying tax. But if you are not paying more tax than you're taking in benefits, you are a drain on this country. You're costing other taxpayers rather than being a benefit. Why do we have those people
What would
here?
you do then? What would you do? Stop their benefits because they don't have the same nationality?
I mean, literally, yes. Because being a citizen of this country gives you greater rights than... I wouldn't expect to go to America or Australia and just rock up and say, just fancied living here. Can you pay me? I would think that was... I've got to be honest with you. I think that'd be quite rude.
How the system works.
That is how, but that clearly is how this works.
Then what would your solution be?
My solution would be very, very simple. Every few years, someone is here. If they're not working, or if they're not, we reassess, and your visa is revoked, and you go home because you're no longer a contributor. Because the number one role of someone who's coming to this country to get this country, unless they are an asylum seeker, a refugee, which should be a very tiny number, should be that they should make this country better for us as well as for themselves. And if they are benefiting but we're losing, that's a no deal from me.
We're all the sons and daughters of immigrants. The entire nation is built by people who've come here. That's the story of our national life.
Paul, this is one of the biggest left-wing lies. This is not a nation built on migration. It's not. On the contrary, this nation had the tiniest number of migrants for most of its existence. It's only since your big mate Tony Blair came in that we've had mass migration on any serious scale. We are not. I mean, yeah, OK, I've got Irish grandparents on one side, but I mean, we're not talking about being a nation that's been... It's not like America that is built literally on immigration. That's not the history of our nation at all.
It is, though, and your Irish grandparents would have faced the same sort of resistance and been told to go back from whence they came.
And if they weren't contributing, they should have been sent back.
With their funny religion and their funny food and their funny accent, and they'd have faced all the same stuff that you're now articulating against people coming here today. So did the Jews, so did the Huguenots, and so did the Romans.
Really? You're pretending. Yeah, we weren't that happy about the Romans or the Vikings. I still want my reparations. You're not into all that, aren't you? This isn't about xenophobia. I couldn't care less what food someone eats, what they look like, their skin colour. I just want to know: can you contribute to this country? Are you a net contributor? Or do you share the culture and the values of this country? Can you integrate and assimilate? That's all I'm interested in. Everything else, I couldn't care less about.
But the story of this country is assimilation, integration, people getting into the economy, starting things, everything from Marks and Spencer's to the latest high-tech companies to your local kebab house is off the back of migrants who come here to work hard, because they tend to be the people who do want to come and work hard.
Apart from the people who are on benefits. And we welcome the people, and we welcome the people who come here and work hard and make a new life for themselves and integrate and assimilate and are part of our culture and will be our friends and our colleagues and local business on the high street. 100%. No issue with that. I don't think any of my audience have an issue with that. But the people who are claiming benefits that cost us billions of pounds, bye-bye, no, you're no use to me.
But as I say, some of those may well be people in work. Some of them will be in transition into jobs or into businesses, because that is how benefit system work is not. I agree, if it's somebody doing it as a permanent lifestyle choice, then that system should tackle that. Because
tackle it by how? Sending them home?
No, but by making sure that the benefits are going to the right people.
So stopping their benefits?
Deserve it.
So you would stop their benefits or not?
Well, if they're fraudulently claiming for benefits.
Not fraudulently claiming. If they're a foreign citizen and they're here and they're claiming benefits.
No, that should not be the criteria. Because we don't want to force people onto the streets and in poverty.
No, not force them onto the streets. We wouldn't be forcing them to do anything. We'd just be saying, off you go, off you toddle. You're no use to us. Bye-bye, go home.
Well, that sounds like, send them back, which is not a slogan I don't think we should be adopting at this stage, Julia.
Does that sound a little bit sort of, xenophobic and bigoted to you?
I haven't said those words, have I?
No, I'm asking you the question.
I just think
you said send them back. As if I think that people who are not born here, are not citizens here, who come to this country supposedly to contribute to this country, to improve their own lives, yes, but they're not actually improving our lives here, because they're not actually high earners. They're not even earning at all. They're on benefits. I don't think that they should still be in this country. I have a funny feeling I'm not in a minority on this.
Well, I think the benefit system needs to work better, which is what Liz Kendall's reforms are all about. But
shouldn't the benefit system be for British citizens?
Well, if people come here to make a better life and they do need some help along the way, and through the benefit system that might be the way they get the help, then I think that's fine, because our country benefits from migration.
Again, I love these statements. Our country benefits from migration. I'm not entirely sure that's how most people feel, including most Labour voters right now. Economically, that is completely factually incorrect. Culturally, I think at the current time, with the mass scale of immigration we are seeing, I think that is definitely provably factually incorrect.
Well, we do need to secure our borders, and we do need to manage migration. It should be people who are coming here to contribute. A lot of people that came here was under Boris, by the way. So you're quick to blame Blair and Brown. The Boris wave is a genuine influx of migration.
I'm fully aware of that.
So it's not down to.
I just think you've just kind of undermined your own argument, but we're going to leave it there. We have to for time. But Paul Richards, always interesting to talk to you, former Labour Special Advisor. Claire Pearsall, your face has been a picture to you, as I imagine your face in the audience has been as well. Claire, over to you.
I know, there are no words. What is in transition? What does that mean? Are they identifying as an employed person? I might start a small
business soon. If you want to come here and start a business and create jobs, brilliant.
Absolutely. You don't need to be on benefits.
It's this idea that if you're not a citizen, if you're not from Britain and everything, the idea, but you shouldn't limit things just to British citizens. I mean, yeah.
But that's the whole point.
Like the vote.
But other countries do it as well. Are they
quite very much considered the norm?
Yes, it is. In this country, it isn't. So that needs to change.
I mean, you just sound like the National Front to me. I think that's what he thought. I think that's where he was going.
That's where
he was. Send them back. Yeah. We should definitely send people home who do not contribute. Yeah, mind-blowing concept. Yeah, because you think the Americans would happily have me there. I'd just like to claim some benefits, please. Can I have my food stamp?
Off you go.
Bye. Thanks for coming. That's what most sensible countries would do. Remember, we are not a sensible country anymore. Built, apparently, on immigration. I mean, the most basic look of genealogy of this country, like, simply not true. Simply not true. Max, a few tens of thousands a year for like most of the last century. Before that, virtually none, apart from being invaded by the Vikings and the Romans. If that's what he's talking about, fair enough, but it's mind-blowing. 11:50 is the time. Up next, tell you what's also mind-blowing. Apparently kids are getting stressed by their GCSE exams. You'll never guess what the solution is from the Education Secretary under Labour. Yeah, you will. That's up next with Chris McGovern from the Campaign for Real Education. This is Talk, Home and Common Sense.
But I mean, was the Tory party not responsible as well for sort of allowing more and more people to become dependent on benefits?
And we went into the last general election with a very clear plan to make 12 billion a year further in savings. And the only way that you do that, Mike, and in a fair way, both to taxpayers and to vulnerable people, is by really doing that deep thinking. And in the case of the PIP reform that we were going to be embarking on, that we've heard this government talk about, we had a long consultation to look at the details of that and what the options are.
There is no requirement for him to go anywhere. He shouldn't go anywhere. If he does, it should be paid for by people. You know, if, for example, the Parliament of, I don't know, Burkina Faso decides that it wants a lesson in how brilliantly the Brits run their parliament and would like him to come over, they would pay for it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is Talk. The time is 11:54. Let's get straight to our next topic, and that is GCSE exam stress. Yeah, I mean, when we did our, let's face it, I'm old enough, O-levels or GCSEs, it's stressful. Kids are still stressed today. Seems to be a lot more pressure on them. Everyone's apparently supposed to get these A's and A stars, or 9s, or whatever they're called this week. But what is the solution to this level of stress? Well, according to Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, it is to slash the number of exams and overhaul the national curriculum. Well, let's talk about this right now with Chris McGovern, Chairman of the Campaign for Real Education. Morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Now, exams have always been stressful, although I have to say I think young people are much more stressed out about these things than I was in my day, and I think parents and teachers are responsible for an awful lot of that. But what is it exactly that Bridget Phillipson is promising to do?
Well, she doesn't like exams, obviously, or doesn't like too many exams, although I think perhaps a bit of stress is quite good in our lives. I mean, I support Aston Villa. I've suffered from decades of stress. And it's quite good, I think, sometimes to understand that children don't always need to be happy and unstressed. It's good to challenge them for them to be resilient.
Yeah. And there are times when you need to perform on the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think where the Education Secretary is taking us is back to the idea of coursework, and that will be written, of course, by the middle-class parents and by AI, becomes unreliable. Nothing is more reliable than a simple pen and paper test, and yet I know it can be stressful, but that's good in a way. We need to test children more. If in private schools, quite often they do tests every week. Problem is in the state set, they're not doing enough tests, so they're not used to tests, so it's stressful. But look, it's a step backwards. But it's a celebration time for the educational establishment. Unions are welcoming this. It's great.
The blob is loving. I mean, these are the same people who don't want kids tested when they come into school or tested at 7 or 11 to have any idea of kids' progress, because if you don't have any proof of it, you can't ever say this school is failing or this teacher or this head teacher is failing. But there's also a lot of talk about sort of dumbing down the curriculum. And one of the things that Michael Gove did when he was Education Secretary was very much reversing that dumbing down, bringing more intellectual coherence in. We know that it did actually succeed because we've got those international comparisons and those stats that show that the pupils in England, not in Scotland or Wales, but in England, they actually went back up the international rankings. Are we looking at losing all of those gains now?
Look, I advise Michael Gove, saying I've been involved in writing 3 national curriculums, so I'm pretty familiar with the territory. Yeah. First of all, I don't think the improvement has been as great as the Conservative Party is suggesting. Yes. Actually, if you look at the most recent, what I call PISA test, the international gold standard, our marks went down. But they were actually slightly better than compared to the Europeans who went down even more. But if you look at Asia, they went up. Yeah. So there's a problem there. But overall, I think there has been an improvement. And it's partly, I think, to the credit of Michael Gove that he did introduce a little bit of rigour into the curriculum. So we're going to go backwards, I suspect. But the Tories tend to over-egg what they achieve. They achieved something, but there's still a long way to go. And did you know that in those latest tests, latest PISA tests, a couple of years ago now, a third of English schools refuse to have the test. So never be totally befuddled by the data, Julia.
No, indeed,
never
because
quite what it's in, but
the schools,
yes, an improvement.
Yeah, the schools that refuse to do the test are probably the ones that had the lowest scores. Again, this is all really important. We need to have external objective judgment of whether someone is achieving anything, whether kids are learning something. And at the end of the day, it is the poorest kids from the poorest homes who are being failed the most by the poor quality schools, poor teaching, and low expectations and low aspirations from their teachers and their parents often. But if teachers have got low expectations of their pupils, what a surprise those kids don't do well.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, of course, what we need is quality teachers. Yeah. The education system will succeed or fail on the quality of the teaching. The curriculum, of course, is important, but it's a shame, in my view, that Bridget Phillipson's also going to take away the right of academies to actually determine their own curriculum. That's a step backwards. Other people are saying this as well. But ultimately, though, Julia, we need high-quality teaching, and I will be on the teacher's side here and say they deserve to be paid more if they're high quality. And we need to reduce the majority of staff in school are not teachers. We need to reduce the number of non-teaching staff.
Yeah, you see the teaching assistants who we're paying a fortune for overall. But again, also, if we're going to have to pay more to get good maths and science teachers, then let's pay the going rate. If those people can go off and get a job that pays twice as much, well, of course, that's what they're doing. We need to pay the going rate. I'm with you certainly on that. Chris McGovern, always so good to talk to you. Thank you so much. Claire Pearsall, you've just been going through the education system with your kids, same as me.
Yes, absolutely. We've got GCSEs coming up. I don't think you need to dumb them down. And you know what? A bit of stress and pressure is a good thing.
I think so much of it comes from the parents and the teachers. And again, the teachers, like, everyone's got to get these top grades. But that didn't exist in my day. Just like you did the exam and it was supposed to be a representation of how well you could do.
Yes.
And it was, and so some people got C's, some people got A's.
Yeah, but you learn, and throughout life, you are going to have situations where you're going to come under pressure and stress. Yeah. There's a shock, isn't there?
Apparently, remember, did you not get the memo, Claire? All children are gifted. Did you not? Apart from all the kids, apparently, you've got ADHD and autism and need an extra 90 minutes for the exam. Yeah, that's another thing we're going to talk about another time. Anyway, so much more to talk about. Coming up, pmqs is up, but don't worry, we're not going to take it live. Peter Cobble's going to watch it, so we don't have to. We're going to be talking about more about that phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Who won? Well, certainly not the Ukrainians. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Great to have your company, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or you connect your device. As I say, lovely to have you on board. I'm with you all the way until 1 o'clock. Coming up in this hour, going to talk more about Vladimir Putin and that phone call with Donald Trump. Who won? I mean, I think the answer is very clear. Vladimir Putin, who definitely lost, the people of Ukraine. We'll talk all about that. More about J.D. Vance as well, saying that Britain is stagnating along with many other Western nations simply because of high levels of immigration. In a speech yesterday, the US Vice President said the West had got lazy by using cheap labour as a substitute for improving productivity. Plus, legal documents about Prince Harry's US visa application have finally been released, but with very heavy redactions. There are still many unanswered questions, particularly about whether or not Harry did admit on his forms that he had taken drugs. I think we know he didn't, don't we? We know he didn't, surely. But do we have a right to know? We'll talk about that. Plus, of course, PMQs has just started, but as always, Peter Caldwell is watching it, so you and I don't have to, and he'll bring us the highlights a little bit later with some clips as well. That is all coming up. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense. Welcome still also to Claire Pearsall, former Conservative government advisor in the Home Office. Very good afternoon to you. It's interesting, actually. I mean, I don't think we're criticising the Home Office too much at the moment, so you're getting an easy ride today.
It makes a change, doesn't it? The Home Office is not front and centre.
Yeah, hurrah! Well done, the Home Office. Not being the worst department this week.
Or
Ish. Today, in this hour. Still plenty of time by the rest of the day.
Absolutely.
Still plenty of time. Question, we were asking lots of people about benefits and that benefit reform yesterday, whether or not actually it goes too far. Is everyone going to die because they don't get their benefits? Or is it actually simply not going far enough? I think we've all agreed it's not going far enough, and it also won't achieve what it says it will achieve. But also, really crucially, want to hear from you about Ukraine. The latest development being Vladimir Putin's phone call with Donald Trump yesterday. Vladimir Putin turning up, I kid you not, an hour late for that phone call that was briefed to be starting at around 3 o'clock. No apology. He was actually on stage at an absolute no mark, nothing conference, and he was actually reminded you're supposed to be a caller. You know, I'm not in a hurry. He didn't agree to anything that Donald Trump had asked. He's rejected the plan for a ceasefire, even though Ukraine has agreed to a full 30-day ceasefire, land, sea and air. Vladimir Putin, no, holding firm. He basically says he won't have a ceasefire other than the demand for a ceasefire on attacks on energy and infrastructure, which of course benefits him much more than Ukraine, given the strikes they've had on his oil refineries and the like. But basically he says that the West must end all military aid, all intelligence sharing with Ukraine, which would basically be the end of the war for Ukraine, but for all the wrong reasons. Your reaction to that, very welcome. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and then your message to 87222. You can also get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Well, let's talk more about this with Rick Gates. He's a former deputy campaign manager for Donald Trump way back in 2016. A very good afternoon to you once again, Rick. Are you there, Rick? Can you hear me? Or you're on the mute button? Hello, I think we can hear you now.
I can hear you.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. This phone call yesterday, Donald Trump says, he wanted to bring peace in Ukraine with a day, and we're talking about 100 days. Vladimir Putin turns up a whole hour late for this phone call, doesn't apparently apologise. He kept his emissary, Donald Trump's emissary, waiting, who travelled all the way to Moscow for 8 hours before he met with him last week. Putin is having a laugh at Donald Trump's expense, isn't he?
Look, I think it was a productive call from the standpoint that they're talking, they're conversing, they're trying to figure out a path forward. I think there was a lot of hope by certainly many Americans that there could be a furtherance of a potential peace deal. That clearly didn't really come to bear. I mean, we had I guess a tentative peace deal on energy and infrastructure assets, but that kind of dissipated with Ukraine and Russia trading rockets and drones overnight. So I think it's going to be a long process. I think it's going to be a frustrating one for Donald Trump. But I think at the same time, you got to try. You got to keep talking. You got to keep getting people to the table. There's another round of meetings in Saudi Arabia on Sunday. Let's see where those go. But I think this is exactly what the world is saying. Remember Vladimir Putin, look at him. The guy can't be trusted. So even if we get to a deal, how do we know that it can be enforced? I think that Putin is testing Donald Trump to a great extent, and I'd be careful if I were Putin, because at some point Donald Trump will get angry and then he will start putting sanctions, he will start putting other punitive measures on Russia, and it will hurt them.
Well, I mean, I suppose that's my hope, that eventually, as Zelensky pointed out in the Oval Office just before Donald Trump decided to have a go at him, and J.D. Vance, you can't trust Putin. He's not, he's reneged on every single deal so far, and the only reason that that he wouldn't trust the word of Putin is because he's proved every time that his word is not worth anything. You say it's productive to have talks. Yes, I mean, jaw better than war. I think we'd all agree. But nevertheless, talk of a US, a Russian hockey match. Talk from Donald Trump very early on in his presidency. No, he's still early on in his presidency, but even in the early days, about possibly ending some of the sanctions on Russia in return for nothing. So far, all these talks have been threats to Ukraine to withdraw military aid and intelligence, demands that Ukraine basically give up territory, give up their some of their mineral supplies, so some of their future wealth, in return for absolutely nothing. What demand has Donald Trump made of Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think he's demanded, one, that the war end. That's
brilliant. Well, that's worked out well.
Yeah, and as we work on that, and as the negotiations continue, let's see what happens. Look, I think part of this negotiation is to see what Russia is going to put on the table, so that
they're going to put nothing on the table. He has the correct answer to that, with all due respect, Rick Gates, is he hasn't asked anything of Putin. He hasn't asked him to do anything.
Well, sure, he's asked them to end the war. I mean,
yeah, and they're not. They said we won't end the war until you basically make it impossible for Ukraine.
Look, we're finally at a table where we're talking about peace and ceasefire. This is more than we've done in the last 3 years. The U.S. is not expending money, taxpayer money, on supporting.
But we're not talking about peace and ceasefire. What we're talking about is surrender of Ukraine territory to the Russian aggressor, with no cost whatsoever to Russia. That's not a peace talks. That's not a ceasefire. That's called surrender.
It was similar to 2014, right? When Europe didn't, protect Ukraine with Crimea and other assets, Russia took that territory as well. So where do we get to a point where we can then, stop what Russia is doing collectively? The U.S. has done nothing in the last 3 years under Joe Biden, right? I think we all can agree.
Well, they've aided Ukraine to enable Ukraine to keep fighting against their aggressor.
Correct, and we've given Ukraine weapons, but we certainly didn't give it in the time needed. The U.S. could have done a lot more earlier, as the UK, as Europe, as other countries could have done. And collectively, we didn't do it.
We didn't, but that's not an argument for then saying, yeah, you know what, if you don't make nicey-nicey with me in the Oval Office or agree to surrender your nation to a psychopathic, proven liar who has invaded your country and ordered his troops to murder and rape and abduct children, well, we're going to take away all of your ability to fight that aggressor. I mean, I'm not entirely sure that that's peace talks.
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, the question is, can we get to a peace process where Russia is going to get back every square kilometer that is taken from Ukraine? I think that argument has passed.
I think you're probably right. Yes, at this point. But that's not an argument. But that's not an argument where, okay, even if the battle lines were, the Ukrainian territory was not de jure but de facto down to the 80% that is left under Ukrainian control. There's no guarantee for that unless there is a Western guarantee of military support if Russia took even an extra spare inch. And Donald Trump has made it clear he's not willing to offer that.
Well, the negotiations are ongoing. Won't get into a lot behind the scenes, but there are certainly other conversations that haven't come to light yet that will, I think, channel these negotiations in a way that you will start seeing demands by the U.S. Once the Russian positions are known, and it's going to take time.
I very much hope you're right, and I think it is perfectly feasible that Donald Trump will try this route, and if he doesn't get anywhere, he could just turn on a dime, because he's done that with with his Western allies, and change tune. But a lot of and basically say, right, I'm going to give Ukraine everything they need. And we'll give the guarantee, we'll do this. And, you want to play, let's play. I think that's the only language that Vladimir Putin will actually listen to. Do you believe that most of the people surrounding Donald Trump, whether it's Secretary of State, whether it's his advisors, whether it's his military chiefs, do you think they're on board with what Donald Trump has had to say? Because this is and his tactics. This is so different from all previous, not just Democrat and Republican policy towards Russia. This is so different. Do you think they're on board?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think the one thing that Donald Trump has done is instilled a very loyal cabinet, people that share similar policy positions, which is why he picked them. So if you take Steve Witkoff, Mike Waltz, Marco Rubio, all of them are on the same page as Donald Trump.
But Marco Rubio has changed his tune on Ukraine massively.
Oh, no, he has. I mean, like he's probably the longest standing politician in the group, right? So it would go without saying he probably has changed his position a couple of times. But there is a big, collection within the current Trump administration that obviously wants to get to peace. They believe they're the team that can do it, but they all are very much aligned on how to get there.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness me, I hope this works, but I've got very, very, very little faith that it will work, and that certainly it will work long term.
Well, hopefully you have more faith in the last 3 years, because nothing's worked in the last 3 years, and that's the point, is we were, over the last 3 years, nothing moved, everything stagnated, more people died, more territory was taken. At some point, you have to get to the point of getting to a negotiation process. Look, Ukraine may not get everything, Russia may not get everything out of it. Certainly the West may not get everything out of it. But if we can get to a place where we are all in agreement of stopping the bloodshed, that's a good start.
Well, you say that. Something has been achieved in the last 3 years. Russia has not been able to take the whole of the Ukrainian territory. That's a massive, massive achievement, given the relative size and the relative power and military strength and richness of the wealth of both of those countries. So that is actually a massive achievement. I just wonder, 3 years into World War II, or indeed, 3 years into the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, whether America would take the same view.
Yeah, and look, my hope is that they do. My hope is that everybody in America sees Putin for who he is. And I think that...
Including Donald Trump?
I do.
He thinks he's a trustworthy guy. He thinks he's someone he can do business with.
I disagree with that. The categorization that the media has outlined with Donald Trump and Russia, I know some of the optics may not be, what the media expects, and they can read into it and they can interpret it. But like, I spent, years with Donald Trump on the campaign trail talking about Russia. He has taken the same tact on Russia as he has on other countries, including China. He has a very hardline approach, but he also has a very pragmatic approach. If he can get a deal done, that is what his goal is. He doesn't look at Russia or Ukraine personally. This is about getting a deal done so that they can move on.
And does it matter what the Ukrainian people feel about that deal?
Well, look, the Ukrainian people, like the Russian people, are going to be divided, right? Just like the American people and the British people are divided on how the process should unfold, what should work out. Are there going to be Ukrainians upset by an ultimate peace deal? Of course, because they're going to have to give concessions. Ukrainians don't want to give concessions. The collective Ukraine, I mean, certainly Zelensky and others are working toward that goal, but nobody ever gets what they want out of negotiations. That's why it's a compromise.
Apart from Vladimir Putin so far, but there we are.
It's not over, Julie. It's not over.
No, I really hope it. I mean, my God, I'm keeping everything crossed that it does work out. Let me ask you about J.D. Vance, the vice president. He gave a speech yesterday, talked about various countries around the world. He named in particular Britain and Canada. He said their economies are stagnating because of high levels of immigration. He said the West got lazy, basically imported cheap labour as a substitute for improving productivity. I mean, I'm thinking, tell me something I don't already know. I've been making this point for a number of years. But I mean, is there an argument also that America has done the same?
Well, absolutely. That's why we're trying to turn the tide, which is why he's messaging those types of things. If you look at what the tariffs are designed to do, what their goals, what Donald Trump's goals are for recreating manufacturing in the United States, this is exactly to what you just said. We are finally messaging on that. We haven't done that in the Biden administration. The UK hasn't done it. You guys are trying to work on it, possibly. But we are certainly, at least in this 4 years, going to try to resurrect manufacturing in the United States. And you're going to continue hearing rhetoric out of that, like for J.D. Vance, for Howard Lutnick, anybody in the Trump administration that has a role in the manufacturing process is going to be talking about this.
Yeah, well, we shall see how this all works. I just finally want to ask you about the latest release of files related to the John F. Kennedy assassination. Seems to be quite a lot of frustration that a huge number of files have been released. A lot of them are blurry. They're photographs of old documents. They're very blurry. A lot of it is stuff that's been released before. A lot of stuff, again, like the Prince Harry visa application, a lot of it is redacted. Have we learned anything new? Is there anything we are likely to learn that's new about this assassination that really changed America, when there are still so many people who believe that actually we've never learned the full truth about it?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Honestly, in what I've reviewed so far, it seems like there are going to be more questions than answers at first glance. The way that the documents were delivered, the way they were dropped, there's not a lot of organization to them. It's going to take people time to go through them. I think, if anything, what we've learned, and this is probably why the CIA in the past has not wanted these documents to be released, is that maybe they weren't formally involved, but there were certainly fringe elements within the CIA that seem to have taken some actions on their own. As we get more documents and we, unveil these things, It'll be interesting to see. But I think, there is a great frustration. Remember, Donald Trump doesn't control what's in them. He's just controlling the release of them.
And he did make promises in the campaign trail that he would release a lot of information.
And I think that's the important thing. I mean, he didn't say the same thing with Prince Harry's visa, at least as yesterday, the report saying, look, our Department of Homeland Security didn't actually show preferential treatment. Okay, that's the answer, right? I think some people, by design, think once these documents are going to release, they're going to release necessary bombshells. That's not always the case. All we're looking for is the truth. And as long as that gets out, but I think it's going to take some time for the JFK files for everybody to unpack these.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you very much, Rick Gates, former deputy campaign manager for Donald Trump back in 2016. Claire Pearsall, come back in on whatever you want to come back in on, really.
It's fascinating, isn't it, about the files? It's a little bit like the X-Files. The truth is out there.
Yeah. Do you think, I have to say, I don't think it's beyond the wit of man to think that there was actually, given what's happened in the last few years in terms of government interference we've seen with free speech and things like that, there was a lot of fear among the right in America, and in a lot, we know the stuff that was going on with J. Edgar Hoover and FBI, but in the CIA as well, there were concerns about what John F. Kennedy wanted to do.
Of course there were, but now the documents are coming out and people are going to pore over them. It's going to give us an idea, a version of truth, I suppose. I mean, 80,000 documents.
More information is always a good thing. Do you think we've got a right to know about Harry's visa application? Because everyone's complaining that an awful lot of this information is redacted. But there is an element where, you know, these are personal documents. Would we want our personal documents out there?
Yeah, I'm a little bit, I suppose, I think more restrained when it comes to stuff like that. If they are personal documents. But it's also up to the Americans, and I personally don't want Prince Harry back necessarily. So
I
they
think
can
my favourite line on this is from Donald Trump, when he said, "Look, hey, I don't want to put more pressure on the guy. He's got a bad enough time with his terrible wife."
Yeah, exactly. I kind of agree.
Kind of where we all are. Anyway, at 12:19 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Up next, we'll take your calls on all the topics we've been talking about. Also, very soon going to be talking to Rupert Bell, who I think has finally recovered from being forced to watch the Meghan Markle documentary. Meghan Sussex. Call her by her correct name, quite right. I'll talk to him about Harry's visa and, of course, more trouble that Meghan is having with dealing with the legals of all of her lifestyle brands. The woman clearly can't employ a single person who is vaguely competent. Anyway, this is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just to let you know, breaking news that the sentencing has begun for Nicholas Prosper. He is the triple murderer. He murdered his family, his mother, brother and sister in Luton last year. 19-year-old. Sentencing was due to start earlier. But once again, we've got a man convicted of horrific crimes, refusing to attend court. Remember Axel Rudakabana, Of course, you know, the Southport killer, Kyle Clifford the other week, the crossbow killer, and Thomas Cashman responsible for killing 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool in recent years. Again, all refusing to attend court. This is just untenable. Tories said they changed the law on this, but Nicholas Prosper is being sentenced right now, expected to get, I think, a whole life sentence. Basically, he pleaded guilty to the murders in February. He also, it emerged, planned to carry out a mass shooting at his former primary school in Luton. That was what was found on his computer after he was arrested. Again, I just think it's just untenable that these people should be allowed to not attend their sentencing as guilty men. The law needs to be changed on that. Clip here, so just a brief word from you on that. As a former Home Office special advisor, your lot said they would change something on that. It was the Justice Department in particular, but it's just unacceptable. They need to be dragged into court, gagged if necessary, handcuffed, pinned down by 3 officers if necessary. They're in court to be sentenced. End of.
Yeah, they have been found guilty. Therefore, they need to be there to listen to the charges put against them.
But
they really do.
I mean, they'd be dragged out of the police van if they'd be able to get back into prison.
Exactly.
They'd be dragged into their cell if they refused to get. They'd be dragged into. I don't understand what the difference is.
But also, their liberty is being taken away from them. They have no rights at this point.
You don't get a choice about whether you go to court.
And that's my view. I would make them
Well,
be there.
if you're pleaded not guilty and you're innocent until proven guilty, fair enough. We can't do anything there. I know. I'm really. This country just has not got a grip. We just have not got a grip. The fact that a convicted killer, convicted murderer, so he planned a mass murder of children at a primary school, has these rights. We have got to get away from this. It's just madness. And part of the problem is the judiciary. The justice, in Luton Crown Court, she'll hand down a very long sentence, but at the end of the day, he's not there to hear that. He won't be there to the victim impact statements, and we saw that again last week with the Carl Clifford and that incredible impact statement from John Hunt. I loved him. I don't know how anyone could go through that, losing their wife and 2 daughters. I mean, that horrific circumstance. Anyway, your thoughts are always welcome on this, but hey, come on, I can't believe you feel any differently from me. I don't know why the judges don't get their act together on this, and indeed the government as well. Let's go to your phone calls, though. Got a couple of calls we're going to get to, one on GCSEs and all that pressure. First up, though, Chris is in Epsom on Ukraine. Hello, Chris.
Hi, good afternoon, Julie. Good afternoon, Claire.
Afternoon. What do you want to say?
Well, quickly on that sentencing, I absolutely agree with you. The judiciary has lost its plot.
Totally has.
The defendants, once found guilty, should be dragged into that court, listen to the charges, listen to the sentence, and listen to the impact statements, no matter what has to be done to make them happy.
Hear to that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right, Russia. I've spoken to you before, Julia, and Philip Ingram. I'm ex-Special Forces in another lifetime. My training was all against Russia in those days.
Yeah.
Now, I agree Trump has done a great thing. He's got people to the table.
Yeah.
But Putin is now the deal is there to be made. Now, with Russia depleted by 750,000 men, approximately, there's similarities between this and Afghanistan, believe it or not. Russia, with its incredible firepower and manpower, couldn't win in Afghanistan because of the terrain, because of the mountains, and because of the fighting soul of the Afghanis.
Yeah.
Now, that's the same reason that Putin hasn't got the whole of Ukraine. Because of the terrain, they got bogged down
outside Kyiv,
Yeah, and also the fighting spirit of the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
Now, with Putin keeping Trump waiting for an hour, when I left the forces, I went into business and I became a deal maker. And the deal needs to be laid now. What needs to happen is while Russia is depleted of 750,000 men and all the equipment, we need to absolutely double or treble, quadruple the arms to Ukraine. Trump needs to step up his security sharing with Ukraine and with weapons and bring Putin back to the table because he can't face a loss with his people at the moment.
He has to have something. He has to have something that's going to look like a win to him.
Yeah, and the thing is now, if we do that, we then have the upper hand because he is bogged down. He was the person that least expected not to conquer Ukraine within a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You wouldn't have gone in if you thought this is what the outcome was going to be.
Absolutely. I mean, there's some... I mean, his whole infrastructure, domestic infrastructure, financially is imploding.
Yeah.
They reckon there's some estimates that put it at his spending on defence is something like 60%.
Well, it's 40% of government expenditure, or Russian government expenditure now on the military effort. But you're saying this is the opportunity. Come to the table, but this is the point where the negotiation would be helped by the West helping Ukraine more financially, militarily, and that's where you'd get a deal. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more there, Chris. Thank you so much indeed for that. Let's go to Laura Jane, who is in Hampshire. You want to talk about GCSE pressure?
Well, I just want to look at it another way, and I know this is going to sound old-fashioned, but when we were doing our O-levels and our A-levels, what was expected of us was to do our best. I always remember Dad saying, when your report comes, all I care about is if it doesn't say you were lazy or didn't try.
Yeah.
And and you did, you got the results that you deserved in most cases.
Yes.
And some of us were. And some of us were more academic, and some of us weren't. And but now what's happened is that since Blair, so many children are expected to go to university.
And if you don't get an A, you're a failure, which is crazy.
If you don't get an A, and also parents are responsible for that. No, they don't mean to be, but what happens is that they know that their child who is capable of going to university is going to have to try to get an A triple star or whatever they call it now, and that's not right. You should be allowed to feel that the University of Life is just as okay for you when you leave school. And if that means leaving after GCSEs and going into some sort of training, albeit, or getting a job. But I do feel that the pressure now makes it, the top down is wrong. And I mean, goodness me, I hated my exams. I was terrified.
Yeah. Didn't we all?
But I wasn't very good under exam conditions. But that was the system.
Yep.
You just had to get on with it. And you learned something from it.
Yeah, and performing on the day, even if you're not doing a job that goes to university. Again, one of the biggest issues is trying to send everyone to uni. We don't need to send everyone to uni. It's mad. Laura, Jane, I so appreciate your call. I couldn't agree more with every single word. Claire Bissell's nodding away as well. Thank you very much indeed for that. I'm going to have to go to a quick break. But first up, time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this summer, plus £10,000.
How'd you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Very, very good luck to you. Right, we're going to take a quick break. Up next, going to be talking to Rupert Bell, our royal correspondent, about Prince Harry and his visa to the United States, what we now know about it, and Meghan in trouble once again over her lifestyle brands. And let's just hope Rupert has now finally recovered from being forced to watch her new Netflix series. This is Talk Over Common Sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. 12:35 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Claire Pearsall is still with me. We're joined right now by Talk's royal correspondent, Rupert Bell. Very good afternoon to you, Rupert.
Good morning, Julia. I have just about recovered. I heard.
That was going to be my first question. Have you recovered? Because last time I spoke to you, we had new Meghan Sussex, not Meghan Markle. Get it right. We had her new lifestyle. I can't remember what it was called. Is it
We Love Meghan?
We Love Meghan. I was thinking it's that, but it sounded so awful it couldn't be the title, but it is. I was off sick for a few days and I was totally bedridden and really very poorly. Couldn't do any news and things at all. And I thought, you know what? That's probably about my level. 5 minutes in, she'd gone and got the honey out of the bees. I was going to say bee's nest. That's a wrong thing. Beehive. And then she started making bath bombs for her guests. Because when people come and stay, she likes to have bath bombs they can take. So genuinely, at that point, I genuinely lost the will to live. I was bedridden and sick, and I still couldn't bear watching it. It was that bad. I have no idea how you got through all the episodes.
Well, you missed the most important bit in the opening, probably 10 minutes, was opening the packet of pretzels and putting them into another bag. So that...
I've never thought of that. This is why I'm not a domestic goddess.
I think Jimmy Fallon on his programme in the States has just lampooned that particular moment. So it's definitely one for the... well, you've got to... Look, there are probably people who found it interesting, but there's another series to look forward to.
Was there someone in a coma? Was there someone in a vegetative state who went, this is the show for me?
Well, the main thing is I was at Cheltenham last week. While you were ill, I managed to have a complete change of direction. So went to Cheltenham for a week and managed to avoid too much Meghan talk. But Cheltenham's now done and dusted.
Now you're back. Well, I hate to tell you. Well, I want to talk more about Prince Harry, but just want to finish on Meghan because she's run into more trademark trouble over her lifestyle brands. Now, she did have a problem with her American Riviera Orchard name for her business. Now, obviously, I had my own equivalent brand, which was a British seaside allotment. I've not sold that much jam. I've got to be honest with you. Maybe if I'd made some jam, that would have been a good start. I don't know. But now she had a problem with that brand. It was it wasn't just that it was a terrible name, but there was a geographical issue with it or something. But now she's got a problem with her As Ever lifestyle brand. What is going on?
Well, I think what it is they are investigating what she's trying to sell. It's not so much that the As Ever brand won't be trademarked, but she failed to sign the form. But she's actually got to explain what she's selling. She said she's selling a few lifestyle sort of products. But she's actually got to be a bit more specific. You know, the jams she's selling.
The pretzels.
The sweet spoons or whatever. The napkins, the table mats.
The rainbow fruit. We discussed the rainbow fruit. I mean, she could probably copyright that. Putting 20 quid's worth of fruit out on a platter.
Well, I know as you told me last time, you're a good cook, but even you, I don't think, would ever be deemed. You'd basically fling that in front of your daughter and say, just eat that fruit, probably.
I'd like to point out that after this conversation, I did actually send Rupert a WhatsApp picture of a Thai meal that I had made. I haven't sent you all the birthday cakes I've made for my daughter. That's next on the list to prove to you that I can do domestic goddess.
Well, maybe you should be doing this series instead and allow the cameras into your house.
I have never had anyone as a guest in my home who I like enough to make bath bombs for. If someone came to my house and said, I'm going to go and have a 2-hour soak in the bath while I'm here, I'd say, sod off home. But that's just me. But then I, unlike the Duchess of Sussex, have friends who aren't on the payroll. But there we are. But this is what I don't get. She's got this massive payroll of people who she seems to go through a new person virtually every week. She doesn't seem to have anyone on the payroll who can do their job.
Well, this is it. You know, launch it, but make sure that all the ducks are in a row. And I'm not sure, you know, if she's making all this jam, where's the supplier? Where is, the products coming from? Who is the team behind her who are managing this? We're not really getting any indication. Yeah. Normally, if I come out to the Cotswolds, we've got a few high-end Cotswold stores, which I'm sure are right in your wheelhouse, Dalesford, for example.
No, I think it's all overpriced. I'm ever so sorry. I'm too cheap.
Well, they are overpriced, but this is the point. But I do know that the team behind that, there is a rows of people working on the various products.
It's a business.
To sell to people in their Chelsea tractors looking for a weekend in the country.
Yeah.
So there's a huge business behind it. Are we seeing anything but as ever? Yes, she may want to make sell some jams, but if you're going to make a profit, you've got to sell an awful lot of jam.
Yeah, absolutely, and at a very high price. Well, I mean, look, they're trying to keep her, maintain her lifestyle. She's trying to keep her brand up. This is all about her, not Harry. I think he made a fleeting appearance in it, but he makes a very big appearance in the news today over his visa. Now, tell us what's been happening with this application from a right-wing think tank in America to try and basically get full sight of the visa application Prince Harry made to be able to go and live in the States.
Well, the Heritage Foundation have been basically at the American government to try and release his immigration documents. Well, originally it said no, then they have released it, but then what they've released it is the most heavily redacted set of papers that actually you don't really get any information as to what he put in that immigration.
So what did they actually, this is the bit I don't get, what did they actually release if the whole point was to release, because the judge who released them originally said he wouldn't, there was a right to privacy in these, and also there's an issue about if people knew his immigration status, that could be a problem for him. I don't even understand. We know he's there legally, he's not hiding, he's not going under the radar. It's just that presumably he doesn't have a right to work. I mean, I'm assuming, I don't think he does any work there.
Well, I find this actually, as Trump, for once I agreed with Donald Trump, where he said, I'm not really going to boot him out. Whatever comes out, he's just got more trouble at home than most people would care for. So actually, for once, Trump was actually making a sensible point. And in a way, I do feel it's a bit unnecessary what this think tank is doing. What's the point? You know, what are they trying to prove?
Do we want him back? No, but here's the thing, isn't it? Because, you know, if the key thing is that if he applied to stay in the States, it would be the norm that if you said you had used hard drugs, you would not get your visa. We know that he's said he's used hard drugs in his interviews and in his memoir, Spare. So he's either lying in Spare or he's lying on his visa form. If for any of us, if you were caught out in a lie like that, you would lose your visa and your right to stay in the country. But we also know the rules are different for very rich people. Very rich people and very famous people get to kind of do what they want. They're not treated like the rest of us.
No, yes, and clearly he's not been treated necessarily like the rest of us. But I would probably suggest that people applying probably are economical with the truth when they're applying for their visa anyway, if you're going to the States. So I think we have to look at it in the round and say, yes, it probably, he has gone there, and some people say objecting, given the Spare and the fallout. And the Heritage Foundation, I think, are very pro the monarchy. So in a way, you can see why they've done this. It's creating, in many ways, making it more uncomfortable for Harry. It's another problem that he's got to deal with. At the moment, he just feels like a rather lost soul because Meghan's now trying to do all these things. We've got a podcast coming out. She's very much trying to get on the front foot, whether successfully or unsuccessfully. That is the big question. But Harry looks like after the Invictus Games, what's he actually doing? He feels like now he's a bit marooned in California as a house husband.
Yeah,
he is the spare. And he's even a spare in his own, you know, OK, they give this loved up impression, but it just feels that his life is a bit sad because he hasn't got his family around him. She's got none of her family around her, yet she's obviously desperate to be in the limelight.
Yeah, and he's kind of dropped most of his friends as well. I always think that's one of the big giveaways. I think the whole thing is all rather sad, I have to say. I think it's all rather sad and tragic. But there we are. But we do keep talking about them. But they make us do it. Rupert Bell, I just can't wait for her to get Series 2. We know she's got recommissioned. Can't wait to force you to do that. But I think we need to do it Gogglebox style. I think we need to actually have you live filmed watching it because that would just be hilarious. And we had Kevin watching it, and that was hilarious as well. Thank you so much indeed, Rupert Bell, Talks Royal correspondent. He was so happy to get back to the horses last week at Cheltenham. Claire, I mean, did you actually watch Meghan's?
No.
No, of course not.
No,
of course not.
No.
Have you ever made bath bombs for someone coming to stay at your home?
No, I haven't.
I don't think I've ever even bought a bath bomb.
Well, I don't have a bath. We have a shower.
You make a very good point.
But also, things get everywhere, don't they, with bath bombs, you know, bits of lavender and stuff. It's not my thing. It really isn't. People come to my house, they can have
But
food
what
and
do you think
drink.
about Harry? Do we have a right to see his views? I mean, the thing is, we know the rules are different for these people. We know that loads of celebrities and rich people get away with things that the rest of us normal folk don't get away with. I mean, it's just how life is, isn't it?
Well, I kind of think so. I don't need to see all the personal details. I'd like him to stay there. I'd like him to be quiet. Him and his wife, just a period of silence.
They can't earn money otherwise. There's no other way. And they are going through it. Mind you, they seem to mostly borrow other people's private jets. So
and houses.
I know, we've really got to work on this lifestyle. Again, should have married better, just saying. And I know her husband. Claire Pissell, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us. Peter Caldwell's going to come in just a couple of moments to tell us what's been happening at PMQ. So I'm afraid we're going to have to say goodbye to Claire. I'd love to hear your reaction to what's been going on at PMQ, to find out whether it's been a lively one or not. You know the usuals. He watches it, so we don't have to. But Claire, absolute pleasure to have your company. Look forward to seeing you next week. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
But I mean, was the Tory party not responsible as well for sort of allowing more and more people to become dependent on benefits?
And we went into the last general election with a very clear plan to make 12 billion a year further in savings. And the only way that you do that, Mike, and in a fair way, both to taxpayers and to vulnerable people, is by really doing that deep thinking. And in the case of the PIP reform that we were going to be embarking on, that we've heard this government talk about, we had a long consultation to look at the details of that and what the options are.
There is no requirement for him to go anywhere. He shouldn't go anywhere. If he does, it should be paid for by people. You know, if, for example, the Parliament of, I don't know, Burkina Faso decides that it wants a lesson in how brilliantly the Brits run their parliament and would like him to come over, they would pay for it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Delighted that Peter Caldwell has joined me in the studio, Talk presenter, of course, and political commentator. Thank you very much. And as always, very grateful that you watched PMQ, so we didn't have to watch the whole thing. And as usual, first question, were there any highlights to talk about?
There was a bit of a highlight, I think.
You're so short this week, aren't you? Should we
one.
drop the whole item, just go straight to Ian Collins?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay,
yeah,
perfect. Ian, can you come in the studio, please, mate? Yeah, apparently. Now, we were expecting, this is going to be a really meaty PMQs. Surely it's all going to be about benefit reform, the big
topic
of the day.
Some of it was, and actually the Conservatives have put down a bill. They're never going to get anywhere with it to exempt things like hospices, children's hospices, for example, from this national insurance rise that's coming in on the 6th of April. So that was one of the questions that Kemi Badenoch talked about, but really overall...
But not talking about the specific welfare reform. The government really supports, well, the ex-government, now opposition, kind of supports what they're doing, but wants to go further. Well,
interestingly, it was Danny Kruger, the Conservative backbencher, a little bit later on in PMQs, that actually brought that up and was the first one to really ask a meaty question about it. Diane Abbott mentioned it a little bit later on, but in terms of Kemi Badenoch, her most significant, her first question anyway, was specifically about the national insurance rise, and really she's focusing on the spring statement next week.
That's coming in less than 2 weeks.
That's right.
Again, and that we're going to see massive extra costs for lots of businesses, charities, public sector, and everyone.
Lots of people who just can't afford them.
Indeed, let's have a watch and a listen.
He keeps talking about budget benefits. Unemployment is not a benefit. Businesses closing are not benefits. I asked him whether he would exempt hospices, even children's hospices, from the jobs tax. He did not answer that question. His MPs know that this could affect end-of-life care. So I will ask the same question again. Will he exempt hospices from paying his jobs tax?
Mr. Speaker, we've already invested £100 million for adult and children's hospices, an additional £26 million in funding through the Children's Hospices grant, but we can't get away with what we were doing in that budget, the root cause, which was fixing the economy they left so badly damaged, a £22 billion black hole. Perhaps you start the next question with an apology.
They want me to answer questions, then we can swap sides.
She says that she wants to swap sides. I mean, heaven forbid.
Well, it's fairly heated. I'm not sure we got anywhere.
No, I don't think we did, actually. And, I mean, she went on to ask quite a number of other questions about, specifically about the budget, well, what she's calling an emergency budget next week. Actually, it's the spring statement.
And we knew there would be
budget.
A spring statement this spring. Now, what was interesting is, I think, like pretty much every single new chancellor who comes into office, Rachel Reeves has said, we're going to have one major fiscal announcement, fiscal event every year. They all say that, and then you have a lockdown.
Yes,
and then there's one every 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But we're going to get that big spring statement next week. And the key thing about that is there ain't no money. There wasn't before, and there's less now.
Very interesting point as well, specifically within this. Just listen to the words that Kemi Badenoch says, and then Keir Starmer does, when she says, will he repeat the pledge that the Chancellor has made in regard to no extension to a freeze and income tax threshold? Because we think that's going to be a big thing next week.
Let's have a watch and listen to that exchange.
The Chancellor promised a once-in-a-Parliament budget that she would not come back for more. And in that budget, she said there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax thresholds. Ahead of the emergency budget, will he repeat the commitment that she made?
She now calls herself a Conservative realist. Well, I'm realistic about the Conservatives. The reality is they left open borders and she was the cheerleader. They crashed the economy, mortgages went through the roof, the NHS was left on its knees, and they hollowed out the armed forces. This government has already delivered.
Also came there none.
No engagement even with the premise of the question. So
Which, by the way, is what every Prime Minister does.
Yeah, they say, well, leave it to the Chancellor.
They did actually, I mean, all governments, but particularly this Labour government, they have absolutely boxed themselves in terms of what they will and what they won't rise, and then we get up there rinky-dink, it's not really a breach of the manifesto commitment on national insurance rises. But again, there isn't any money. Things are getting worse, and there's no doubt at all, certainly with the welfare reform, supposedly is going to save £5 billion. We don't know that yet. We're going to have to wait for the Office Budget Responsibility Statement next week. But even then, we won't know because, of course, people have found a way around the welfare, the disability payments claims so far. I think it's not beyond the wit of man that they're going to find their way around later to other changes.
I agree with you, and I think it'll be the verbal gymnastics next week of the Chancellor, especially if there is this fiscal drag, bringing far more people into higher rates of tax. That would, of course, increase the tax for them. They want that, but it'll be funny because I think they'll almost say nothing about it. They'll just let it come out in the detail, but that's one of the big questions coming up.
I've covered so many budgets in my time when you've got all these
What they
announcements
don't
all
say.
looking fine, and then you go outside into the lobby in the House of Commons, and there's what's called the huddle. And you've been in many of those,
Yeah.
I'm sure, as well. And when there are people looking to documents, and you've got the sort of the policy wonks, technical term, they're looking at the numbers at the back, and all of the big story, you know, the pasty tax
Yeah.
or whatever, the big story is always in the detail in the back.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Later on in PMQs as well, Lee Anderson, the Reform MP, got a question about
They've
net
still
zero.
got an MP.
They've got 4 of them, apparently. 2 of them in the chamber today as well. So
Right.
very exciting.
Well, again, let's find out what Lee Anderson had to ask the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Prime Minister a very simple question on behalf of all the net zero sceptics. If we became net zero tomorrow, by how much would it reduce the Earth's temperature by? Simple question.
Minister. Mr. Speaker, net zero is of course not easy, but it's a huge opportunity to boost our growth, our jobs and our economy. And so he knows my views on that. But you know, he complains that I've better ideas if they stop fawning over Putin. And I understand the member for Clacton wants to be Prime Minister. He can't even lead a party that fits in the back of a taxi.
Ouch. That's a little bit harsh. I have to say, Lee Anderson is superb at those sort of questions. In
Simple,
Parliament.
straightforward.
Very, very simple, just very straightforward questions. You know, what will this actually achieve? I think net zero, I mean, it's interesting. Kemi Badenoch now rowing back on that. Again, it's the Tories that put all that stuff into legislation. Theresa May, frankly.
She's doubled down on it today as well, Theresa May.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, Theresa May has so much to answer for on so many different issues. But in terms of the long-term damaging legacy to this country, net zero is the one that is really, really hurting us. But it is absolutely fascinating with how much I think net zero is going to be a dividing line. The last general election was Reform, the only party that was saying they'd get rid of net zero because it's utterly it's just utter nonsense. And as Kemi Badenoch said, it's a fantasy, it's impossible, it will bankrupt us. I think this is going to be one of the key issues along with immigration.
Yeah, I agree with you. Kemi Badenoch has changed her tune on this. She's definitely done a 180, and I think that a lot of other Conservatives will as well. I don't think anybody doesn't want the environment to be some sort of issue talked about in some way, but net zero, especially as we're 1% of the world's carbon emissions, well...
That's not even... thing is, we can make that. It's not even the argument. It's a load of nonsense. Net zero is nonsense.
But the good thing is, Julia, we did send Ed Miliband to China within the last week, and he asked them very nicely to shut down their coal-fired power stations.
What happened then? Did that go as well as Trump's phone call with Putin?
I think so. He should have offered them a bacon sandwich.
Must ask you, just after that phone call yesterday, the difficulty for Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron and Friedrich Merz in the new German, will be at some point the German Chancellor. Here's an argument against, by the way, PR. They still don't have a chancellor
get round
in
it
place.
at some stage.
At some point, yeah. Don't worry, it's only a brink of World War III. It might be quite useful if Germany had an elected leader. But how the Western leaders, particularly Keir Starmer, are handling Trump and Putin at the current time. But that is a tightrope they are walking.
Well, in the words of A1, they're caught in the middle, and really there is a big issue here for Keir Starmer. He wants to be big and involved and important, but actually, really, it's about Trump and Putin here. And we have a call at the weekend, for example, with Starmer involved with Macron, NATO, and others. They're trying to be as supportive as they can, but they really are trying to assuage both. Really Trump and also the European side, which is very, very different.
And not angering Donald Trump, who could do so much more damage to us with the sanctions
Trade
and the like.
And all the rest of it.
I'd say I think I call it as I say. I think Starmer's actually done quite well on that front so far.
On the foreign affairs front, on the domestic front, but many challenges ahead.
David Lammy, not so much. Anyway, we've now been joined by the wonderful Ian Collins. Very, very good.
The words of A1, did you just say, Carl? Come on, go New Kids on this.
That's not the worst of his sort of pop references.
It's not. It's not.
They could be so much worse than that's why I let it go. That's why I let it go.
Just glossed over that.
Just pretend it didn't happen. It's the best thing.
Do you know what's funny about the Starmer position on? And you're right. He's doing what is widely seen by most people as being fairly reasonable, steady job. But the pretense
on foreign affairs
on this one thing,
everything else.
But the idea that he's on the same page as Trump, which he keeps saying, we both want the same thing. We're both. You're completely different.
Do you think they have the same thing that we do? Or not? I wake up in the morning and it's we've got a plan for the show. What we're going to talk about. And it's like, oh God, what's happened overnight in the White House, which is what the last few weeks have been like. I mean, that's the. By the way, just bringing breaking news: Nicholas Prosper, who has been sentenced to triple murder of his mother, brother, and sister, and planned a massacre at his old primary school.